Chapter 622. The base of Salamandra, in front of Wuming and Ren, was not a large and imposing building. However, compared to the ordinary buildings around it, the base of Salamandra was clearly different and had a unique temperament. In front of the gate of the Salamandra base, there were two guards with dragon horns on their heads. Their faces were slightly red and ferocious, and they looked ferocious. There was no doubt that these two people had a trace of the fire dragon viper's blood in their bodies, which caused their faces to be slightly dragonized. Their faces were slightly red and they had dragon horns on their heads. One of the guards saw Wuming and Ren walk to the front of Salamandra's gate and immediately stopped them. "Please stop, this is Salamandra's base, unrelated people are not allowed to enter." Although the guard used the word please, and his tone was not that bad, it was not friendly at all. After Wuming heard this, he could not help but laugh out loud. Seeing the two guards frowning because of Wuming's laughter, Ren nervously pulled on Wuming's sleeve, his eyes showing a trace of helplessness. "Big brother, don't laugh, can't you see that his eyes are not right?" Wuming read such thoughts from Ren's eyes. However, Wuming could not help laughing. Although Ren had only been the leader for 3 years as the leader of the allied community, the people of Salamandra did not recognize him and even said something like, "Unrelated people." How could Wuming not laugh? However, it could also be confirmed that after Salamandra unilaterally broke the agreement with No Name, they really did not have any contact with No Name. Otherwise, how could the other party not recognize the leader of the allied community? From the time Ren told Wuming that Salamandra unilaterally broke the agreement, Wuming did not have a good impression of this community. Unilaterally kicking away an ally when it had no value, and without any reason at all, this was not how a person should behave. Although Wuming did not know what kind of mentality the leader of Salamandra had when he cooperated with No Name, but Wuming knew that the other party did not have any sincerity now. Since this was the case, then Wuming did not need to be friendly with the other party. Wuming stopped laughing and pressed Ren's shoulder, indicating for him to calm down. Then Wuming looked at the guard. "Salamandra's ally in the East District is here to visit, please inform them." Wuming's words were the same as the guard's before. Although his tone was not that bad, it was not friendly either. The guard's tone was not good, Wuming and Ren. However, Wuming's tone made the guard angry. "How dare you? I have never heard of any alliance between Salamandra and the East District. Hurry up and leave this place. This is the base of Salamandra, we will not allow you people to behave so atrociously." The guard who asked the question earlier had an impatient look on his face and pointed his spear at Wuming and Ren. "Hurry up and leave. Salamandra is a middle-class community with a 5-digit number. If you continue to stay here, you will suffer." The other guard was slightly more friendly and did not point his weapon at Wuming and Ren. He only waved his hand at the two of them, indicating for them to leave quickly. The two's actions reflected their personalities. It could only be said that they were worthy of having the fire dragon viper's bloodline. Their tempers were slightly irritable. Wuming was not angry because of these two small characters. Instead, he thought of something else. Since these two people were arranged to guard the door, it meant that their position in Salamandra was not high. It was not wrong for them to not know about the alliance between Salamandra and No Name. Looking at the two's actions, it did not seem like they were lying. In other words, the leader of Salamandra not only unilaterally broke the agreement with No Name, but also blocked the news. But thinking about it, it was not surprising that such a vulgar community could do such a thing. Thinking about this, Wuming stopped thinking about it and smiled at the guard who pointed his weapon at him. Bang! As if something exploded, a soft but hurried sound came from the guard's spear. This gave the guard a fright. Then he realized that his spear had broken. Clang! The spearhead fell to the ground and made a sound. Looks like Salamandra's weapon isn't that sturdy. It actually broke on its own after using it for a while. Wuming laughed mockingly. You bastard? What kind of strange gift did you use?" The guard whose weapon broke retreated in panic. The other guard next to him held his spear and looked at Wuming cautiously. Then he ordered the guard who retreated 2 steps. Hurry and call for help." It seemed that this guard was more experienced than the hot-tempered guard. But in Wuming's eyes he was still very young. Then after hearing the guard's words, the guard ran away. No, he went to call for help. And the guard who was in a stalemate with Wuming had his weapon broken under Wuming's smile. "You." The guard was shocked and retreated. There was no other way. Wuming's invisible telekinesis was too strange. To be honest, what if the next thing to break was his head? At this time, a voice came from the door. Hurry. Someone is causing trouble in Salamandra." It seemed that the other side had called for help. Wuming smiled slightly. Mr. Villo, why don't we leave quickly? Rin pulled Wu Ming's hand unnaturally and whispered. Don't worry, Rin. We came with sincerity today. If they want to cause trouble, then let them come. We are not afraid. Wu Ming patted Ren's shoulder confidently, indicating that he should be more confident. However, Rin was about to cry. How is this sincerity? You are clearly here to cause trouble. However, Rin also knew that Wu Ming was half a problem child. Then Rin gave up persuading Wu Ming because the other side's people had already surrounded the two of them. Wu Ming looked at the people surrounding him with weapons. These people were all members of the Salamandra community who had the blood of the alternative dragon. There were even a few alternative flying dragons in the sky that were ridden by the members of Salamandra. As for Salamandra, it was obvious that they were ganging up on him, which attracted the attention of the surrounding passers-by. Moreover, although Salamandra's base was not in the downtown area, it was not in the suburbs either. Therefore, there were many other shops around. To put it simply, a lot of people had gathered around to watch the fun. Chapter 623. Look, someone is causing trouble in front of Salamandra. What? Someone actually dares to cause trouble. Don't they know that the ceremony hosted by Salamandra will be opening in 2 days? They've hit the nail on the head. Salamandra has been on full alert for the past 2 days. They're afraid that someone will cause trouble. That's right. If they dare to cause trouble during this period of time, they'll be miserable. But they don't seem to be from the North District. Speaking of which, I heard that in order to make the ceremony go smoothly, Salamandra invited the ruler of the East District. Really? The ruler of the East District, Lord White Yaksha, is here? With Wu Ming's super hearing, Wu Ming basically heard all the words of the passers-by without missing anything. However, there was one thing that made Wu Ming feel awkward. It was not strange for the North District to know that the ruler of the East District was White Yaksha, but it sounded like they respected White Yaksha. But it was also true. Although White Yaksha was very casual in front of Wu Ming and the others like a problematic child, he was still a demon lord with a 2-digit number. Usually, he was a very dignified existence to the outside world. Moreover, the ruler of the East District was the guardian that protected the people of the lower class. Naturally, he would be respected. However, if they knew that White Yaksha's true face was actually a problematic child, their belief would probably collapse. At this moment, Wu Ming suddenly heard a more useful information. Speaking of which, I seem to have seen Lord White Yaksha's figure enter Salamandra's base. White Yaksha is also in Salamandra. Wu Ming laughed. His laughter became more and more miserable. A thought called causing trouble lingered in Wu Ming's mind. Looking at Wu Ming's smile, Ren, who was already extremely worried, became even more worried. I shouldn't have let the Villo accompany me. Instead, I should have let him walk around alone. Ren could not help but speak his mind. However, how could this escape Wu Ming's eyes and ears? Don't worry, the face that No Name lost today when Salamandra unilaterally abandoned the contract, I will take it back in double leader. Wu Ming emphasized the word leader, which made Ren stunned. After pausing for a few seconds, Ren nodded emotionally. Thank you very much, Mr. Villo. Please help me regain the face of No Name, please. Ren bowed to Wu Ming. Although Ren had always valued peace, he was not a person who would not fight back when he was bullied. In the past, they didn't fight back because they didn't have the strength. But now, the community had taken in a new powerful partner. Since he wasn't strong enough, he had to know how to rely on his companions and trust them. It was because Ren Zhen believed that his partner would return one day that he and Black Rabbit worked tirelessly to protect their no-name community. And those partners who left, compared to Letitia who had already returned, believed that the remaining members of the community would protect this home. Wu Ming suddenly grabbed Ren's arm and lifted his body. How can I let the leader bow to a member, especially in this kind of environment? Wu Ming said as he casually looked at the people of Salamandra, who had a fierce look on their faces. Ren also reacted. Ren, you have to remember you are the leader of the community. You can't do what you did today again. Wu Ming warned Ren seriously. Yes, I understand, Mr. Villo. Ren straightened his spine and responded firmly. Then Wu Ming's face instantly turned into a casual smile. However, you still have a long way to go. Do your best, leader Ren. Wu Ming smiled and patted Ren's shoulder. Then he looked at the people of Salamandra. What, you're not going to attack? Wu Ming smiled again. This smile scared the young man who was the first to have his weapon broken by Wu Ming's strange method and made him retreat. The others also looked nervous. It seemed that the other party knew that their weapons were broken after Wu Ming's strange smile. Needless to say, it must have been the young man who told them. It was also because of their vigilance that this group of people didn't attack Wu Ming rashly. This allowed Wu Ming and Ren to have a rare opportunity to talk while surrounded by people. This was a rare experience, there wouldn't be a next time. Isn't Salamandra famous for ganging up on people? But today I've seen the hospitality of Salamandra. Wu Ming smiled lightly. However, this smile coupled with this sentence was really ridiculing. This made the people of Salamandra grit their teeth. Their faces that were originally red because of the fire dragon's blood turned red once again. However, Wu Ming's words reminded them that Salamandra's tactics were group battles. There was no such thing as a one-on-one duel. Therefore they were no longer polite. Everyone attacked together. Let him see the power of Salamandra. Among them, the young man who had his weapon broken by Wu Ming's telekinesis changed his weapon and pointed it at Wu Ming. In his opinion, Wu Ming's ability definitely couldn't be used on so many people. Moreover, they were a community that was good at group battles. Therefore, attacking together was the best choice. Oh! The people of Salamandra roared, cheering themselves on. However, when this group of people was about to rush up and attack Wu Ming closed his eyes. Looks like I'll have to teach you guys what it means to have a person stronger than you. Following that, Wu Ming suddenly opened his eyes. In an instant, an invisible pressure engulfed the surroundings. They couldn't move. Although that was the case, their bodies were trembling instinctively. A pair of golden vertical pupils were engraved in the hearts of every Salamandra member present. At the same time, the fear of Wu Ming was also engraved in their hearts. Because of Wu Ming's precise manipulation, the passers-by and Ren were not affected at all. In their opinion, it was just that Salamandra members had stopped immediately after moving. What happened? I don't know. Why did Salamandra stop fighting? Could it be that they were scared stiff? How could that be? The two people that they surrounded didn't do anything. What the hell is this? However, it wasn't that everyone didn't have the insight. I think I saw that man close his eyes and then open them again. The members of Salamandra stopped moving the moment he opened his eyes. Really? You didn't see wrongly, right? Is it really as scary as you say? It can't be some kind of powerful gift, right? Because these passers-by didn't dare to get too close to Salamandra, encircling Wu Ming and Ren, they didn't see the change in Wu Ming's eyes. At this time, a lazy but familiar voice came from Salamandra's main door. Wu Ming. Ben's here, kid. Chapter 624. Hearing the familiar voice, Wu Ming looked at the door. You're finally out, White Yaksha. Wu Ming said as he removed the pressure on the members of Salamandra. Crash. The weapons scattered on the ground. The members of Salamandra who were originally holding these weapons also sat on the ground one by one, panting heavily as if they were drowning and had just been fished out of the water. As if confirming Wu Ming's words, White Yaksha slowly walked out of the door. However, White Yaksha wasn't the only one who walked out. Behind him was a man and a woman with dragon horns. They were obviously members of Salamandra. The man was tall and had a fiery red crew cut that was 10 centimeters long. He wore a long jacket with long sleeves that reached his ankles. Perhaps it was because of custom or something else, the man wore cool sandals on his feet. There was also an extraordinary-looking sword at his waist. The man's face was rather capable and experienced. On his forehead above his eyebrows, there was an obvious bulge that extended to both sides of his forehead. Compared to the other members of Salamandra, it was thicker and sturdier, with dragon horns growing out from it. Wu Ming could tell that this guy's viper dragon bloodline was quite advanced. However, Wu Ming was a little unhappy when he looked at him and Ren with disgust from time to time. Wu Ming was sure that if this guy was not the leader, then he was a member of the upper echelons who knew about no name. Looking at the other person beside him, it was a young girl with a small body. Her height was only half the height of the man beside her, and she looked abnormally young. The young girl wore a special golden hair accessory on her head. Her fiery red hair was tied into a high ponytail at the back of her head. Her forehead was slightly parted in the middle, and there were 2 long vertical strands of hair on both sides of her head. The girl's upper body was only covered by clothes that covered her chest and a small section of her arm, looking rather open. Her lower body was a more conservative skirt that reached below her knees and had a flame dragon pattern printed on it. The girl's feet were also wearing the same cool open-toed shoes as the man beside her. The girl's waist did not have a sword, but the girl's wrists and ankles had golden ornaments, which added a hint of appeal to the girl. Asterisk cough cough asterisk. Asterisk although it was a little embarrassing to think like this, Wu Ming had no choice. The young girl's clothes were a little revealing, but looking at her age it was not considered revealing. In Wu Ming's opinion the other party should be no, to be precise she was indeed not a young girl. She should be a young girl. In Wu Ming's opinion, this young girl was probably not an adult yet. Or rather this young girl looked about the same age as Ren. From the small and weak dragon horns on both sides of the young girl's forehead, which almost made Wu Ming doubt if they were real, it could be seen that the young girl's age was probably not that old. More importantly, there was a hint of panic in the girl's eyes. It was exactly the same as Ren's eyes when Wu Ming saw Ren. However, this made Wu Ming certain one thing, and that was, this young girl was probably the current leader of Salamandra. After all, if it was not an important position, Salamandra would not let such a young girl follow White Yaksha and that man out. It was not like, no name, had no one to use, so they let Ren become the leader of the community. And when Wu Ming was sizing up the young girl, the man beside her began to frown even more. No name guy, put away your rude gaze. The man loudly scolded Wu Ming. This scolding made the young girl's body tremble slightly. Wu Ming's eyes flashed. In fact, if it was not for the fact that he saw the same hard work in the young girl's eyes as Ren, Wu Ming would probably think that the young girl was holding the emperor to order his subjects by the man beside her. What a coincidence, White Yaksha, why are you here? Ignoring the particularly arrogant man, Wu Ming looked at White Yaksha. This made the man frown even more, but because of White Yaksha and the surrounding passers-by as well as his own subordinates, he temporarily endured. Don't you know? Salamandra is the community that is holding this fire dragon's birth ceremony. Didn't I tell you? White Yaksha was surprised. As expected. Wu Ming nodded knowingly. This was why the passers-by said that Salamandra had quit smoking in order to hold the ceremony, and why they said that they had invited White Yaksha. After hearing the passers-by's words, Wu Ming began to make guesses. In the end, the truth was just as Wu Ming had guessed. Then he looked at the young girl behind White Yaksha. This so-called fire dragon's birth ceremony was probably related to this young child. However, you really didn't tell us that No Name's ally is holding this ceremony, White Yaksha. As Wu Ming spoke, he pushed Ren, who had not spoken since he saw the two people behind White Yaksha, forward. Wu Ming's words seemed normal, but in fact there was a hidden killing intent. This was undoubtedly mocking Salamandra's unilateral act of breaking the contract. The expression of the man behind White Yaksha changed. He probably understood it, but the young girl did not change at all. Now, because she was not shrewd enough, she did not understand the meaning behind Wu Ming's words. White Yaksha's expression also showed a hint of embarrassment. After all, it was her mistake this time. She knew that Salamandra and No Name used to be allies, but because of the big changes between No Name and Salamandra, coupled with White Yaksha's carelessness, it led to this accident. It's just No Name. It's no longer qualified to be our ally. The man did not hold back this time, or rather, he had reached his limit. He directly said, it's just a mere. This made the passers-by and Salamandra members stunned. It seemed like this nameless No Name was really an ally of Salamandra. However, the man did not care about other people's gazes. His expression did not change. However, the young girl's face turned slightly red. She looked a little embarrassed. After all, Salamandra was the one who unilaterally broke the contract. They did not have the advantage. Seeing the disharmony in the scene, White Yaksha tried to smooth things over. All right, everyone. Let's go in and have a chat. Wu Ming and Ren naturally did not mind. The young girl from No Name did not disagree. However, the man was unhappy that mere No Name had entered his community. I'm helping you, Mandela. You don't want to continue making a fool of Salamandra, right? White Yaksha whispered to the man named Mandela. However, this silence was only for the passers-by and Salamandra members who were sitting on the ground. To Wu Ming and the others, this little bit of sound could be heard. In the end, Mandela frowned and nodded helplessly. All right then. Chapter 625. Wu Ming brought Ren and followed White Yaksha into Salamandra's base without any hesitation. They entered Salamandra's living room. When they arrived at the living room, White Yaksha and Wu Ming did not stand on ceremony. They went straight to the guest seats and sat down. This made Ren a little nervous. He kept complaining helplessly, is it really okay to be so casual? Then Wu Ming pulled Ren to the seat and pressed him down. Mandela and the girl made some arrangements for the Salamandra members who were frightened by Wuming. Not long after they arrived at the living room. After Mandela and the girl arrived at the living room, they walked to the main seat. Immediately afterward, as expected by Wu Ming, the person who sat in the main seat was the girl, not Mandela. Mandela stood beside the girl, acting as her second-in-command, advisor or something like that. Following that, the leader of Salamandra, who was the host of the event, opened her mouth to speak. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Shadora Turturek. I'm the new leader of the Salamandra community. Please forgive our community members for offending you just now. The girl named Shadora looked apologetic. It seemed that Shadora had learned the reason for the incident when she went to deal with the Salamandra members who were frightened by Wuming. Although from the words of the Salamandra member, Wuming seemed to be the troublemaker, Shadora knew her own people well. She was afraid that things were not that simple. Moreover, from the conversation between the other party and White Yaksha, the relationship between the two seemed to be good. It was impossible for someone who could be looked up to by White Yaksha to be a sinister villain. Therefore Shadora directly apologized to Wuming. It's okay. I'm not a calculative person. The little lesson I gave them just now was enough. Wuming waved his hand, indicating that she did not need to take it to heart. This made Shadora smile. However, Mandela was not slow. It's just no name. I let you in because of Lord White Yaksha. Don't push your luck. Mandela looked at Wuming angrily. Brother Mandela, don't be like this. Shadora pulled Mandela's sleeve a little timidly. Through Shadora's words, Wuming knew that the two of them were brother and sister. Not only that, but Wuming also gleaned more information from these few words. Looking at Shadora's expression, it was likely that Salamandra and No Name's unilateral abandonment of the agreement was mainly due to Mandela's contribution. The treacherous fellow really has the guts to say such things, Lord Mandela of Salamandra. Wuming emphasized the word, Lord, and smiled, mocking Mandela quite powerfully. You. Mandela was furious. His hand instantly reached for the sword at his waist, looking like he wanted to go forward and slash Wuming. But then a pair of golden vertical pupils stared at Mandela, causing Mandela to freeze on the spot. Without power you can naturally be bullied by others at will. That is the law of all worlds and all regions. Wuming stared at Mandela with his golden pupils and said word by word. However, after the other party has power, it can't continue. Because then those who take the initiative to bully will pay an irreversible price. The pressure released by Wuming gathered on Mandela. Not only was Mandela unable to move, but he was even close to death. Brother Mandela? I'm sorry, Lord Villo. Please forgive my brother's rudeness. I'm leaving you. Shadora's first sentence was a surprise at Mandela's current state, and the last few sentences were pleading to Wuming. She even stood up and looked like she wanted to kneel. It was because she also sensed that Mandela was in danger at the moment. For her brother's life, there was nothing to hesitate about. However, when Shadora bent down, she found that she could not bend down anymore. It was as if she was held up by an invisible force. At this moment, White Yaksha, who had watched a lot of drama, spoke. All right, Villo, give me some face. Hearing White Yaksha's words, Wuming's eyes turned from golden vertical pupils to the usual red pupils. The pressure on Mandela also disappeared. Ha, ha, ha. Mandela, who felt relieved of a heavy burden, took a few steps back. He leaned against the wall when he almost fell, panting heavily. Ignoring Mandela, Wuming looked at Shadora. I just taught our leader. Now I'll teach you, Shadora. As the leader of Salamandra, kneeling to the enemy because your family is being held hostage is a betrayal to Salamandra. Wuming reprimanded Shadora mercilessly. Then Wuming removed the telekinesis on Shadora. Remember, before being your brother's sister, you have the identity of the leader of Salamandra. Shadora was a little down, but seeing that Wuming let her brother go, she nodded honestly. Yes, I understand, Lord Villo. Then Wuming patted Ren, who heaved a sigh of relief. This gave Ren a fright. White Yaksha, since Salamandra doesn't welcome us for the time being, we'll leave for now. If there's anything, let Salamandra come to us with sincerity. With that, Wuming didn't give Shadora and White Yaksha a chance to speak. He pulled Ren and left Salamandra's meeting room. Really, this kid? White Yaksha shook her head helplessly, but she didn't say anything. After all, she didn't explain clearly that Salamandra, who unilaterally abandoned their alliance with No Name, was the community that organized the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. It was considered a dereliction of duty on White Yaksha's part. After Shadora saw Wuming leave, she quickly ran to Mandela, who was leaning against the wall. Brother Mandela, are you okay? Shadora helped Mandela up. She wanted to help her brother to the nearest leader's seat, but Mandela pushed her away forcefully. He wasn't the leader, so he couldn't sit on the leader's throne. That was the reflection of Mandela's heart. Mandela, who had a strong sense of self, wouldn't sit on the leader's seat. That was one of the few advantages of Mandela's annoying stubbornness. I didn't expect that such a person would join No Name, Mandela said with lingering fear. That's the result of your lack of judgment. You can't blame others, Mandela. White Yuxia opened the origami paper in a bad mood and habitually covered the lower half of her face. Fortunately, you really provoked him this time. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to save you. Mandela listened to White Yuxia's words and nodded slowly. I understand. I won't clash with that person again. I hope so. White Yuxia walked toward the door after she finished speaking. When White Yuxia turned around, Mandela's eyes showed a hint of conflicting worry and relief. Chapter 626. Wuming and Ren walked out of Salamandra's conference room. Along the way, no one from Salamandra stopped Wuming and Ren. It seemed that everyone in Salamandra knew how powerful this seemingly ordinary young man was. Then Wuming and Ren came to the street. Some passers-by who saw what happened looked at Wuming in awe. The people of Salamandra were shocked by this powerhouse's inexplicable method, which made these passers-by respect him. But fortunately, because of this respect, these passers-by did not bother Wuming, which was what Wuming wanted to see. Then Wuming made a suggestion. It's still early, let's walk around a little. Ren nodded. It was indeed quite early, so he was not in a hurry to find a hotel to rest. On the way, Wuming and Ren chatted casually. Ren, do you know Shadora? Ren was taken aback by Wuming's sudden question, but Ren immediately reacted and nodded his head. Yes, 3 years ago, before No Name was attacked by the Demon King, our community and Salamandra had worked together many times. In addition, Shadora and I are of the same age, so we knew each other. As Ren spoke, a smile appeared on his face as if he recalled the time when No Name met Shadora before she was attacked by the Demon King. But then Ren's smile turned into a bitter smile. Wuming naturally understood the meaning behind it. It was nothing more than the same things, but people had changed. 3 years ago, the two of them were still living a carefree and peaceful life, but 3 years later, the two of them had become the leaders of their own community, and their respective communities had also experienced different degrees of attacks. Although Salamandra still had the ability to hold a large-scale festival, it could be seen that Salamandra was not as relaxed as it seemed on the surface from the fact that Shadora had become the leader of the Salamandra community. The changes that Salamandra had undergone in the past 2 years were not a joke. Moreover, when Salamandra invited White Yuxia to hold a festival together, it could be seen that the other party had some unspeakable difficulties. Suddenly, as if he had just reacted, Ren thanked Wuming. By the way, Mr. Villo, thank you for what you said to Shadora. These words were not only useful to Shadora, but also to Ren because both of them were unqualified leaders. Simply put, they were quite immature and still needed more training. It's nothing, it's nothing. I can also see that Shadora is not as scheming as her brother, so I chose to help her. He did not continue to attack Mandela was not only to give face to Yuxia, but also to help Shadora. Only Mandela and Shadora could be considered decent in the huge Salamandra. After all, Salamandra was a community that focused on group battles, and individual strength was not the priority. However, the two of them were only good in Salamandra. In No Name, not to mention Wuming and 16 Knights, Shadora might not even be able to win against Haruai Toshiaki and Joyuki. No, it should be said that the immature Shadora was unlikely to be able to deal with Joyuki, who grew up in a scheming environment, and Haruai Toshiaki, who came from the future with advanced ideas, unless Shadora was far stronger than the two of them. However, in Wuming's opinion, she did not have such strength. At most, Shadora would be able to suppress the two of them, and she did not have the strength to win. As for Mandela, it was hard to say. His shrewdness was deeper than Shadora, and even Haruai Toshiaki and Joyuki. There was not much difference in strength, but in terms of intelligence, Mandela had a high chance of winning against the two of them. However, this was only Wuming's speculation. There was no absolute chance of winning, just like the Rick that Wuming knew. In Wuming's opinion, if he did not go to that world, Rick would have the possibility of overturning the war through his own efforts, although the possibility was quite slim. However, what humans did not lack the least was possibility, and this principle could also be used on you, Ren. Wuming thought so and looked at Ren, who was deep in thought. Mandela? Is he very scheming? Ren asked in confusion. Although Ren and Shadora did not have much contact with Mandela, in Ren's opinion, Mandela was just a rather strict person who did not want to shame his community. However, if Wuming knew Ren's thoughts, he would not know whether to laugh or cry. However, this was also a good thing about Ren. However, Wuming did not dare to compliment Mandela's unilateral breach of contract as not wanting to shame his community. In Wuming's opinion, this kind of behavior could only be done by people who only cared about profits. However, each person had their own opinion, so Wuming did not expect to persuade Ren. Wuming also began to patiently explain why Ren did not notice Mandela's scheming. How about this? I'll put it simply, Ren. Wuming thought for a moment. Shadora, the leader of Salamandra, is not scheming. You can see that, right? Facing Wuming's question, Ren nodded. In that case, Shadora must have a person who is the opposite of her. What Wuming said was the opposite. He was referring to scheming. Otherwise, Salamandra wouldn't have been able to stay in this 54545 outer gate as a 5-digit community. Ren had only become the leader after No Name had suffered a huge blow. The other communities had no interest in exploiting a community that did not have the slightest bit of profit. Otherwise, No Name would have disbanded a long time ago. How could they have lasted for 3 years? The situation of Salamandra was the same. Shadora became the leader, and Mandela dealt with the dark side for Shadora, who was ignorant of the world. Wuming even suspected that Mandela had other motives for inviting White Yaksha. However, there was insufficient information at the moment, so everything was just a guess. Immediately afterward, Wuming patted Ren's back and smiled slightly. You really have a lot to learn, leader? This made Ren more and more confused, but the considerate person did not continue to ask. Wuming ended the conversation with one sentence. Then Wuming did not talk to Ren anymore. Instead, he sped up and began to wander around. The Fire Dragon Birth Festival in the North District this time was not for show. Exquisite glass art pieces were placed on the streets for pedestrians to admire. Coupled with the unique architectural style of the North District, not to mention those who had never been to the North District, even the locals of the North District were affected by the atmosphere before the festival began. Immediately afterward, Wuming looked at the huge red boundary wall in the distance. Salamandra, as the regional ruler and the outer door ruler of the outer door of the 54545, had the authority to make reasonable changes to the boundary wall. Now, there was a passage in the boundary wall that had been transformed into an exhibition corridor. It is said that there is an exhibition hall in the boundary wall. Let's go take a look together. Ren looked at Wuming looking at the boundary wall and suggested. Wuming, who had nothing to do, naturally would not reject and was about to nod in agreement. At that moment there was an argument in the crowd. Chapter 627. The passers-by began to talk about it. Let's go, I heard you two is here. Are you for real? Seems like it's true. I heard there's you two on the roof over there. Why is you two on the roof? Why would the boxing aristocrats appear on the lower level? Don't worry about it, let's go and take a look. I haven't seen a boxing aristocrat yet. Wait for me. Me too, wait a minute, let's go together. Then the passers-by began to move in a certain direction, probably to see the legendary Tuesday. Wuming and Ren did not move, because the two of them had completely heard the passers-by's conversation and were stunned on the spot. Wuming and Ren looked at each other and nodded. This so-called U2, if Wuming and Ren guessed correctly, should be Black Rabbit. I always feel like 16th Night and the others have done something troublesome again. Ren laughed dryly and complained. Sigh. Wuming sighed as well. It turned out that he and Ren were thinking the same thing. Although Wuming had been holed up in the library for a while, Wuming did not really become a shut-in. Wuming still knew some news about the outside world. Wuming still knew about things like, the competition venue was destroyed by a blonde man, the short-haired girl who was loved by animals and caused an animal version of the ghost parade, the girl with long, straight black hair caused a ruckus because someone spoke rudely to her. Wuming was worried that these 3 problem children would cause trouble, so after Black Rabbit chose to follow, he let Letitia follow as well. Letitia, who had recovered her strength, and Black Rabbit, who was not weak, should be able to keep these 3 problem children in check. In the end, Wuming still underestimated the ability of these problem children to cause trouble. I'll go take a look first, Ren, you can catch up later. Ren was stunned. However, Wuming didn't give Ren time to react. After he finished speaking, Wuming jumped and left Ren's side, heading towards the place where the crowd gathered. Wait a minute, Mr. Villo. However, Wu Ming had already arrived at the back of a crowd that had gathered inexplicably. Wu Ming raised his head and looked at the people on the two tall buildings in front of him. Reversing 16 knights and Black Rabbit each occupied a tall building. They looked at each other as if they were two peerless experts. Sure enough, it's 16 knights again. Wu Ming shook his head helplessly. Wu Ming guessed that it was 16 knights in reverse. Among the three problem children, 16 knights was the most difficult to deal with and also had the highest attribute of a problem child. However, at least now he couldn't see Jiao Fei Niao, Heruai Bu Yao, and Letitia's figures. The two who wanted to cause trouble were probably subdued by Letitia. What the hell is going on? Wasn't everything fine when I came here? Wu Ming already felt the horror of a problem child. Although Wu Ming was half a problem child, at least Wu Ming wouldn't cause trouble in the place where the ceremony was about to be held. At this time, Wu Ming sensed Letitia's location. At this moment, Letitia was very close to Wu Ming. After becoming Wu Ming's dependent, she was like a radar. Wu Ming could sense her location at any time. Since he already sensed Letitia's location, then he should go and take a look. At least I need to know what happened to make this happen. With this mentality, Wu Ming waved one hand, and the dark purple ripple swallowed Wu Ming like a giant mouth. This made the passers-by who accidentally saw it scared out of their wits. They couldn't even watch the fun and quickly left. In an alley where Black Rabbit and Reverse 16 Knights could be seen confronting each other, Letitia helplessly looked at Reverse 16 Knights and Black Rabbit who were standing on the roof. She then turned her head to look at the two people behind her. Of course, they were two of the three problem children, Jiao Fei Niao and Heruai Bu Yao. At this moment, the two of them were tied with a thin black string. Although the string was thin, Heruai Bu Yao tried to break free with the strength of an elephant, and the string was undamaged. Heruai Bu Yao's life catalog not only had the ability to communicate with animals, but also the ability to obtain the abilities of these animals, beasts. For example, 2 days ago, it was said that Heruai Bu Yao participated in White Yiksha's gift competition and became friends with a griffin. He successfully obtained the ability to walk on air. It had to be said that this was an interesting gift. It was worthy of being called the highest grade of human gift. Wu Ming was also classified as a divine beast. If Heruai Bu Yao could obtain a part of Wu Ming's power, then it would be a huge gain. Not to mention being a tyrant in the Hakata world, Heruai Bu Yao could be considered an invincible existence in the middle and lower levels. Even in the upper levels of Hakata, Heruai Bu Yao could occupy a place. If that was the case, then 16 Knights wouldn't be able to do anything to Heruai Bu Yao. However, it wouldn't be that easy to obtain abilities from Wu Ming. As for how to do it, no one knew. Back to the main topic, Letitia looked at Jiao Fei Niao and Heruai Bu Yao and began to criticize and educate them. Can't you three problem children be more honest? Even if you don't think for the benevolent master, you should think for Black Rabbit. Look at how angry Black Rabbit was just now. Letitia puffed up her cheeks and was quite angry. However, in the eyes of others, it was more cute than angry. Okay, we were wrong. As the saying goes, people under the eaves have to bow their heads. Jiao Fei Niao and Heruai Bu Yao obediently bowed their heads and admitted their mistakes. Then Heruai Bu Yao and Jiao Fei Niao began to chat. I didn't expect Letitia to be so strong, Heruai Bu Yao said with jealousy. Why? Because she was caught in an instant. That's right. We didn't see anyone, but this black rope caught the two of us in an instant. If it wasn't for 16 Knights being smart, we would have been caught too. Jiao Fei Niao looked angrily at the black rope that tied her up like a shadow. Although I lost my divine spark, becoming the master's dependent has greatly increased my power. I'm not any weaker than when I had my divine spark. In fact, I'm even slightly stronger. It's more than enough to catch the two of you. Letitia looked as if she was proud of being Wu Ming's dependent, with a smile on her small face. Tisk X2, it's useless. The master is already here. You disobedient problem children, I'll let the master deal with you later. Letitia smiled at the two of them. Jiao Fei Niao and Heruai Bu Yao didn't want to admit defeat and turned their heads away. At this time, Wu Ming's voice was heard. You two are quite stubborn. Chapter 628. Master. Letitia bowed to Wu Ming, who walked out from the shadows to show her respect. Wu Ming waved his hand casually. Although Wu Ming had told Letitia many times that there was no need to bow to him every time she saw him, Letitia was still stubborn and had to bow to Wu Ming every time she saw him. After a while, Wu Ming gave up on persuading Letitia. After all, she wouldn't lose anything by bowing, right? At this time, Jiyuko and Haruai Hibakushi, who had turned their heads away, turned their heads back. Villo, we are on the same side, right? Haruai Hibakushi looked at Wuming stubbornly. Let us go. Jiyuko didn't hold back and shouted at Wuming angrily. Then I'm sorry. Let's not talk about Jiyuko's attitude first. Wuming shrugged and walked in front of Jiyuko and Haruai Hibakushi. About the problem of being on the same side, I don't think I'm on the same side as you. Traitor. Shameless. Jiyuko and Haruai Hibakushi looked like they were betrayed by a traitor. If a passerby who didn't know the situation saw it, they would probably think that it was a tragic drama where two righteous girls were betrayed by a man who was supposed to be on the same side as them. If Wu Ming knew what the two of them were like, he would even have a feeling of, could it be that I'm really a traitor and betrayed them? But there was no if. Wu Ming stretched out his hands and hit Jiyuko and Haruai Hibakushi on the forehead with lightning speed. Ouch, 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 ouch. Jiyuko couldn't help but tear up. Ouch. Although Haruai Hibakushi didn't seem to be in much pain, his slightly wet eyes proved that he wasn't as relaxed as he looked. Then can you tell me now? What did you guys do to end up like this? However, after Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao were humiliated by their enemies, their beliefs became even more firm. They were truly unyielding and indomitable. Rejected. Ditto. After the two of them finished speaking, they turned their heads to the side again. However, as captives, the two of them had no right to speak. Looks like you won't confess if I don't do something ruthless. Wuming smiled. However, this smile made Jio Yuasuke and Kasumi's hearts tremble. Their bodies couldn't help but tremble. However, this wasn't enough to convince them. Wuming, who knew this, looked at Letitia. How about this, Letitia, you come with me? Let's play with the two of them. What do you think? Wuming said as his hands moved, as if he was stretching his muscles and bones. As long as you're happy, master. Letitia nodded with a smile, indicating that she would accompany Wuming. Wait a minute, I'm a lady? How can you torture a lady? You? Don't you dare. Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao saw that Wuming didn't seem to be joking. The two of them immediately panicked. Scared? Sorry, it's too late. Then Wuming smiled mischievously. Instantly, chains appeared out of thin air. Then the chains hung Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao up. Their hands were placed horizontally, and their bodies were upright as if Jesus was being tortured. At the same time, the black rope that Letitia tied to the two of them disappeared. Then Wuming wrote a few runes in the air that they couldn't understand and slapped the runes in the air. This was a Lune rune technique with a soundproof effect. Then Wuming snapped his fingers and two feathers appeared out of thin air. Wuming said as he handed one of the feathers to Letitia. Come, Letitia. Letitia nodded and took the feather. Then she walked with Wuming to Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao, who were hung up. Then, under the two's despairing gaze, Wuming took off their shoes. About a few minutes later, Wuming twisted his waist and moved his body twice. I didn't expect you guys to be so strong. Wuming looked at Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao, who had taken off their shoes. Their clothes were drenched in sweat, and they were panting as if they had just run a few thousand meters. There was also Sanmao Cat, who wanted to hug Wuming's leg to show her loyalty to her master. In the end, she was hung up by Wuming's pseudo-heavenly lock. We won't submit. No? That's right. Although the two said so, the exhaustion in their eyes and bodies told them that they couldn't go on anymore. Forget it, I'm not playing anymore. Wuming threw away the feather and looked at Letitia, who also threw the feather to the ground. Tell me what's going on, Letitia. Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao froze. That's right, Letitia knows what happened. Why didn't you ask her earlier? But Wuming kindly explained to the two. Wouldn't that be boring? Then Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao glared at Wuming with murderous eyes. But Wuming just shrugged happily. Letitia sighed helplessly. That's the punishment for this mess. Letitia looked at Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao with pity. Then Letitia told Wuming the whole story. When the three problem children left the Thousand Eyes branch to go shopping, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia followed them. Perhaps it was because of the supervisor. The three problem children were quite well behaved in the beginning and didn't cause any trouble. But problem children were still problem children. After shopping for a while, the three problem children began to rely on the people in the downtown area to play hide and seek with Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia. Because the three problem children were honest at first, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia relaxed a little. As a result, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia couldn't find the three problem children. But thankfully, the two of them still managed to find 16 knights and the other two. They were on top of an extremely tall art building, looking at the scenery outside the 54,545 gate. This caused a commotion among the pedestrians. After all, the building the three problem children were in was a rare piece of art. Knowing that the problem children caused trouble again, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia began to capture the problem children. 16 knights ran away quickly, while Jio Yuasuke ran away because of her poor physical fitness. When Kasuga Biao was about to leave with Jio Yuasuke, the two of them were tied up by Letitia with a shadow rope. One of Letitia's gifts, Dragon's Shadow. It was one of Letitia's gifts that had many uses. Wings, weapons, shields, stealth cover, it could be said to be very versatile. And Letitia's strength had recovered to 4 digits. Along with Kasuga Biao, who was half a beat slower because of taking care of Jio Yuasuke, the two of them were caught together by Letitia. 16 knights and Ryu Yuasuke, on the other hand, were in the same situation as before. Chapter 629. After I caught Miss Asuka and Miss Yao, I was following Black Rabbit and 16 knights in the dark. However, they were too fast, so I couldn't catch up with them. Letitia was referring to small alleys like this one. After that, Master, you came over? Letitia finished her sentence. Wuming knew what happened after that, although there wasn't anything else. I understand. Thank you for your hard work, Letitia. Wuming patted Letitia's head. Letitia, on the other hand, looked like she was enjoying it. It had to be said that if Letitia's current lowly state and her current expression were seen by those lolicons, who knew how much cuteness they would have. Although Wuming wasn't a lolicon, Wuming had no self-control when it came to cute lolas. Beast. Pervert. That was what Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari said when they saw Wuming's happy expression. You two are really energetic. Wuming narrowed his eyes and turned to look at Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari. This reminded the two of them of the fear of having their souls controlled by feathers. Snap. Wuming snapped his fingers and the silver chains that bound Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari were released. With a clattering sound, the chains returned to the ripples at the top. Jio Asuka fell to the ground on her butt and made a sound of pain. Although Haruai Hikari also fell to the ground on his butt like Jio Asuka, Haruai Hikari's physical fitness was much higher than Jio Asuka's, so she didn't feel much pain. However, because of Wuming's punishment, the two didn't have much strength at the moment. Otherwise, Haruai Hikari wouldn't have fallen to the ground on his butt. At the same time, Sanmao, who was released by Wuming, jumped into Haruai Hikari's arms and meowed worriedly. Then Wuming walked to the two who were sitting on the ground. Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari looked at Wuming's shadow and couldn't help but tremble. Even Sanmao's fur stood on end. Then Wuming personally helped the two of them put on their shoes while Jio Yuasuke and Haruai Hikari looked on in surprise and embarrassment. Wuming clapped his hands and stood up. What happened just now is just a lesson from this time's trouble. Even if you're a problem child, you still have to remember the occasion. Don't do it again. Wuming's tone was quite gentle, just like a big brother next door. Furthermore, Wuming had personally helped them put on their shoes. This made Jioyuki and Haruai Hikari blush. Then Wuming looked. Letitia, look after them. I'll go check on 16th Knights and Black Rabbit. Yes, Master. After Letitia nodded, Wuming waved his hand. A dark purple ripple appeared and engulfed Wuming. After watching Wuming leave, Letitia walked to Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari and stretched out her hands. The ground is cold. Get up, you two. Although Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari wanted to get up by themselves, they didn't have much strength left because of Wuming and Letitia's antics. Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari had no choice but to hold Letitia's hand and stand up. How is it? Master is very gentle, right? Letitia's sudden words made Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari, who were patting the dust off themselves, blush. They recalled the scene where Wuming helped them put on their shoes. He's just a lecher. That guy treated me like that. Even if it's a punishment, I'll remember it. Jio Asuka glared at Letitia. Letitia had also attacked her just now. Jio Asuka remembered it clearly. Unforgivable. Haruai Hikari hugged Sanmao, who was already out of breath, with a face full of displeasure. However, their reactions were seen as shyness in Letitia's eyes. It could only be said that giving carrots with carrots was very effective, wasn't it? Let's go, Haruai Hikari, Jio Asuka said politely to Haruai Hikari. After Haruai Hikari nodded, Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari looked like they were about to leave. What? You two still want to run? Aren't you afraid of Master's punishment? Letitia looked at the two with a smile. The two trembled. They definitely didn't want to go through that kind of hell again. However, Asuka thought about it again and smiled at Letitia. Villo only asked you to watch over us. He didn't say that we can't leave, Letitia. Asuka called Letitia intimately. Although it was a play on words, Letitia knew that Asuka and Haruhi Hikari wouldn't cause any more trouble. Moreover, with her around, they wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. If that's the case, then fine. Just like that, Letitia followed Asuka and Haruhi Hikari in the opposite direction of 16 Nights in Black Rabbit. Asuka and Haruhi Hikari really wanted to have a good time shopping. After all, if they were interrupted in the middle of shopping, it would be very unpleasant. While Letitia, Asuka, and Haruhi Hikari were shopping, at the tall building where 16 Nights in Black Rabbit were before, a dark purple ripple appeared on one of the tall buildings and Wuming appeared from it. Why was it where they were before? It was because the two of them were no longer there. Seems like I was having too much fun with Asuka and Hikari. Where did 16 Nights in Black Rabbit go? Wuming scratched his head. Dong. Suddenly, a loud sound was heard from somewhere not far away. Wuming turned around and saw that the top of a clock tower had broken for some unknown reason, and the big bell on the clock tower had fallen along with it. With his excellent eyesight, Wuming saw 16 Nights in Black Rabbit falling along with the top of the clock tower. Needless to say, the clock tower's destruction must have been done by 16 Nights. The big bell, along with a large number of small and large stones, fell onto the street, causing panic among the onlookers on the street. It should be said that it was impossible not to panic because the stones were falling directly onto the crowd. The people below the clock tower started to panic as they scurried in all directions. However, due to the height of the clock tower and the fact that the residents of the box court world were people who could easily accept sudden surprises, it only took a few seconds for the crowd to escape. Evacuate. However, if the stones in the top of the clock tower were allowed to fall, even if it did not cause any casualties, it would definitely cause damage to the street. Geez, always giving people trouble. Wuming shook his head helplessly. Immediately after, the falling bell tower and stones seemed to have been frozen in midair. Chapter 630. The residents who retreated to the surrounding safe area looked at the strange scene of the bell tower being fixed in midair, and they all discussed in surprise. What's going on? I don't know. Could it be a gift from a powerhouse? I don't know, but this disaster is stopped. Thank God. Wuming used his telekinesis to fly to the side of the falling object, that was controlled by his telekinesis. Looking at the wreckage, Wuming was even more certain that this was 16 Nights' masterpiece. There was no pattern and the traces of destruction were obvious. Other than 16 Nights, Silent Cries didn't think that there was anyone else who could be like a berserker. Wuming had a way to recreate a replacement on the top of the bell tower with advanced item creation, but it wasn't easy. He had to let Wuming analyze the structure of the bell tower. If only Kalis was here. Wuming sighed. Wuming recognized the importance of Kalis more than once. If Kelly was here, it would only take a second for Silent Wonder to complete the scan. Silent Wonder would then be able to use his advanced item creation. But after all, Kalis was now with his original body, and his original body was nowhere to be found. It could only be said that things didn't go as planned. However, Wuming wasn't a pessimistic person, so he didn't dwell on this issue. Let's talk about the repair later. Wuming looked at Black Rabbit and 16 Nights who had landed on the ground below. With the strength of the two, they naturally wouldn't die from falling from a high altitude, and it was naturally even more impossible for them to be injured. The two landed safely on the ground, but there was a strange thing. They were holding each other's arms. Moreover, there was a contract document. It seemed that the two had made some kind of bet. However, it looked like it was a tie because both of them looked unhappy at the moment. Wuming landed directly below. Before reaching the ground, Wuming heard the complaints of 16 Nights. I absolutely can't accept it. It's obvious that my side is faster. 16 Nights, who had never lost in games, was very unhappy about the draw. Boxing's judgment won't be wrong. If you have any opinions you can appeal, but the result won't change. Black Rabbit was quite satisfied with the result of the draw. Anyway, her goal had been achieved. From the point of being able to issue any order to 16 Nights unconditionally, Black Rabbit had already profited. Being able to make a problem child obey an order, no matter how you think about it, isn't it? Wait for me, you two. Wuming interrupted at the right time. Yo, isn't this little brother? What a coincidence. When 16 Nights saw Wuming, it was as if all the previous unhappiness had disappeared. Do you want to have a match with me? The winner will get the chance to give orders to the other party. However, Wu-Ming pointed behind him. You guys deal with them first. Wu-Ming's tone was full of helplessness. Black Rabbit and 16 Knights looked behind Wu-Ming, but the problem was that there was nothing above. Wu-Ming kindly reminded. Black Rabbit and Reverse 16 Knights raised their heads and saw a group of flying dragon subspecies descending towards them. Among them at the forefront, there was a man who didn't ride a dragon. That was Wu-Ming's old friend, the scheming man Mandela. Huh? What is that? The straightforward 16 Knights expressed that he didn't know what those people were doing. That's the military police belonging to Salamandra. Black Rabbit showed an expression of being finished. That is to say, they are here to catch us. 16 Knights had a burning look on his face. Please don't be so happy, Mr. 16 Knights. We've gotten into quite a big mess. Black Rabbit was mad at 16 Knights' cheerful and optimistic attitude. More than once, Black Rabbit had the urge to strangle 16 Knights to death. We are finished this time. Black Rabbit bent down dejectedly, looking like he had lost his life. You two don't talk later, I will deal with this old friend. Wu-Ming looked at the approaching Mandela and said to Black Rabbit and 16 Knights without looking back. Oh, this is going to be interesting. 16 Knights' reversal looked like he was waiting to watch a good show. He naturally understood what Wu-Ming meant by old friend. Mr. Villo, do you know the people from Salamandra? Black Rabbit obviously didn't understand that Wu-Ming's old friend was derogatory. In short, don't talk. As soon as Wu-Ming finished speaking, the military police from Salamandra landed. Thieves in front, don't move. Mandela acted as if he didn't know Wu-Ming and roared at Black Rabbit and 16 Knights behind Wu-Ming. But Mandela's words actually included Wu-Ming. Wu-Ming narrowed his eyes. It seemed that this guy was a little more powerful than Wu-Ming thought. But it's just a little bit more powerful. Give me some face, Mandela. The two behind are my people. There are no casualties in this incident, and I will personally fix the clock tower. How about it? Wu-Ming said, his whole body exuding a dangerous aura. This aura made the flying dragon subspecies ridden by the Salamandra military police feel uneasy, and began to become restless. But the Salamandra military police also had some skills, and none of the flying dragon subspecies were out of control. Black Rabbit also felt Wu-Ming's strong aura. Although Wu-Ming did it for them, he was a little uneasy. After all, they were outsiders. They caused trouble in other people's territory, and their attitude was so tough in the end. It was inevitable that people would feel uneasy. However, for Wu-Ming, his companions were the most important. As long as they didn't make any big mistakes, if Wu-Ming had the ability, he wouldn't mind covering up for his companions. After all, you couldn't expect a problem child to correct his mistakes. Therefore, weakness was the original sin. This was still the case where Wu-Ming gave face to the other party. If it was White Yiksha's people who caused such a disaster, Mandela would probably turn a blind eye. Wu-Ming's request with a threatening attitude made Mandela very uncomfortable, but he already knew that the other party was a powerhouse who was not weaker than White Yiksha, so his attitude needed to be slightly changed. As early as when he rushed over, he saw Wu-Ming with this group of criminals, so they must be a group. But since the military police had already come out, there was no reason to return without any results. It would be too embarrassing. However, it was still possible to turn a blind eye to it now. As suspects, the two of them must go to Salamandra, with our military police. Without any superfluous words, Mandela put forward his bottom line. Of course. Wu-Ming nodded. Since the other party gave him face, Wu-Ming naturally wouldn't refuse. Letting Black Rabbit and 16 Knights go back with Salamandra was a small punishment for the two. Although it was impossible to learn from going back to the 16 Knights, it was impossible. Then please. Chapter 631. Wu-Ming brought Black Rabbit and 16 Knights with him and followed Mandela's military police to Salamandra's base. Wu-Ming didn't care about the destruction of the bell towers that were fixed in the air by Wu-Ming's telekinesis. This became the scene of the fire dragon's birth ceremony, attracting many people to come and see the falling objects hanging in the air. It could be considered a blessing in disguise. With Wu-Ming's telekinesis, it wouldn't affect anything if he just controlled the falling objects from Salamandra's base. Therefore, Wu-Ming didn't care about it for the time being. Let the falling objects stay in the air and deal with the matter in front of him first. Salamandra's conference room, on the wide rectangular conference table. Shadora sat at the head of the table, Mandela sat on Shadora's left, and White Yaksha sat on Shadora's right. On both sides of the three sat a few higher-ups of Salamandra, but it was obvious that they were all gathered together. When Wuming first met White Yaksha, only Shadora and Mandela accompanied him. In other words, only Mandela and Shadora were the real higher-ups, and the others weren't considered higher-ups. Or rather, they were Mandela's trusted aides. And for this meeting with No Name, Mandela pulled a few of his trusted aides over. After all, when facing No Name, only Shadora and Mandela were there, it was inevitable that it would be rude. From Mandela's point of view, among the two powerhouses present, White Yaksha was obviously leaning towards No Name, and Wuming was completely on the side of No Name, so he had to treat No Name with caution. Even if Mandela looked down on the other side as a community, Mandela still had to be polite. On the seat opposite Shadora, Ren, the leader of No Name, sat there. On the way here with Salamandra, Wuming and the others happened to see Ren with a helpless and slightly panicked face, so Wuming brought their leader over. However, inexplicably starting a meeting with Salamandra made Ren quite nervous. The other members of No Name sat on both sides of Ren. On Ren's left was Wuming, and on his right was 16 Knights. It had to be said that 16 Knights, as a suspect, was able to sit here was thanks to Wuming. Otherwise, with Mandela who looked down on No Name, 16 Knights who was of low birth and caused trouble, would be punished by Mandela. Although Mandela would probably be taught a lesson by 16th Knight. Immediately on 16 Knights' right side sat Jiyuasu and Sat. Good heavens, this is a group of problem children. Although Jiyuasu Ants brought Letitia to go shopping, when Wuming found Ren he also found the three of them. After all, it was not easy for the members of No Name to gather, so Wuming did not give Jiyuasu Ants a chance to go shopping. Instead, he let Letitia bring the two of them to follow Wuming to Salamandra's base. After all, No Name still had to talk with Salamandra. As for Letitia and Black Rabbit, they sat on Wuming's left side. Although Black Rabbit and 16 Knights got into trouble together, but with the name of Hakata nobility, even Mandela did not want to pursue the responsibility of Black Rabbit as a Moon Rabbit. It had to be said that the Hakata nobility, the Moon Rabbit race, was really a jack of all trades in the Hakata world. No matter who it was, they would have respect for the Moon Rabbit race. Therefore, even if Black Rabbit was a member of No Name, Salamandra still easily forgave her. Finally, there was Letitia. Although Letitia considered herself as Wuming's maid in No Name, but to outsiders no one would think of Letitia as a maid. If a tiger was full it would not hurt you, but would you really dare to sleep next to a tiger? You would be scared to death. This analogy was very apt for Letitia. Even if Letitia was a maid, they would only think that it was the bad taste of the owner who owned Letitia. They would not dare to really see Letitia as a maid. Let's not talk about ordering her around. If you let a 4-digit person stand in front of Salamandra, a 5-digit person listen to people talk, even if Letitia would agree, would Salamandra dare to do so? A 4-digit person was a 4-digit person, belonging to the upper echelons of Hakata. As a 4-digit person, Letitia completely had the qualifications to sit next to Wuming. And Letitia also understood this principle, so under Wuming's instructions she sat next to Wuming. Seeing that everyone was present as the host, Shadora spoke. Regarding the destruction of the sacrificial bell tower by Mr. 16 Knights and Miss Black Rabbit, because there were no casualties and the street was not damaged, Salamandra decided not to pursue the matter. However, the price is that No Name will be responsible for repairing the damaged bell tower. Does No Name have any objections? Shadora first made a ruling on the disaster caused by the actions of Black Rabbit and 16 Knights. But as Shadora said, because there were basically no losses, No Name only needed to repair the bell tower. In this regard, Mandela had no objections. After all, even if he didn't give face to No Name, he had to give face to White Yaksha and Wuming, right? One was the person who led No Name here, and the other was a powerful person in the No Name community. Even if he wanted to throw a tantrum he had to hold it in. No Name has no objections to Salamandra's decision. This sentence was said by Ren. After all, if the communication between communities was not spoken by someone other than Ren, it would inevitably cause the community to lose face. Wuming and 16 Knights knew this, so they didn't speak. However, when 16 Knights saw Ren's body trembling slightly due to nervousness, he gently patted Ren's back. Ren glanced at 16 Knights, and under 16 Knights' trusting smile, Ren gradually overcame his fear. With a big brother like 16 Knights, Wuming didn't need to comfort Ren. The problem of Black Rabbit and 16 Knights' destruction had come to an end, so next should be the main event. Then regarding the birth of the Fire Dragon and the Demon King's attack, do you have any preparations? Wu-Ming took the lead to open the door to this topic, but this surprised Ren and Black Rabbit. Mr. Villo, why did you? Black Rabbit wanted to say something but stopped. Clearly, Black Rabbit was concerned about why Wu-Ming exposed this information. Because Salamandra must have known about this long ago. Am I right, White Yiksha? Chapter 632. Wu-Ming said as he looked at White Yiksha. Villo is right. The higher-ups of Salamandra already know about this. White Yiksha nodded slowly. This wasn't hard to understand. After all, the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony was organized by White Yiksha and Salamandra together. It didn't make sense that White Yiksha knew about the Demon King's attack, but Salamandra didn't. After White Yiksha knew about the prophecy of the Demon King's attack, he first looked for the organizer of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, Salamandra. However, in order to not cause panic, very few people in Salamandra knew about this. It should be said that the only people in Salamandra who knew about this were Shadora, Mandela, and a few of Mandela's trusted aides. Because of this, the members of Salamandra did not show any signs of surprise. However, a few of Mandela's trusted aides were surprised by Wu-Ming's bluntness in revealing this secret. No matter what, the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony and the Demon King's attack was already a secret. If others heard about it, it would be troublesome. In the worst case, the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony would be destroyed before it was even held. However, since you know that the Demon King's attack will happen during the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, why don't you just cancel the ceremony? Jiu Yuanfei asked. That's right. The Demon King's attack was so serious that people would die. So why continue to hold the ceremony? Was it because of a matter of reputation? After all, canceling the ceremony would affect the reputation of the community. Of course it's not that simple, Yuanfei. White Yiksha explained to Jiu Yuanfei. Although in the eyes of others, Salamandra was completely capable of bearing the price of a failed Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, no one wanted to lose out. Furthermore, it would be foolish to choose his own reputation in such a situation. White Yiksha could not hold the ceremony with such a community. If that was the case, White Yiksha would have left long ago. However, White Yiksha's words made everyone feel awkward. Although canceling the ceremony is the wisest choice under such circumstances, the reason why Salamandra didn't cancel the ceremony is really related to its reputation. White Yiksha's words stunned No Name, including Wu-Ming and 16 Knights. They really didn't think that it was really a matter of reputation this time. Then Wu-Ming looked at White Yiksha, who was looking at them with mischievous interest. In other words, Salamandra cannot be cancelled, or rather it cannot be cancelled. We must continue with this ceremony, Wu-Ming suddenly said. If I'm not wrong, the reason why it can't be cancelled should be related to the name of the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. At this moment, 16th Knights reacted in time and followed Wu-Ming's words. That's right. The Fire Dragon birth ceremony is a celebration for Shadora's birth, so it can't be cancelled. Mandela nodded. However, Black Rabbit and the others couldn't understand Mandela's words. It was a rare celebration to commemorate Shadora's birth. Couldn't it be cancelled? Shadora wasn't some super powerful or super famous big shot? If only it was really a ceremony for Shadora's birth. Wu-Ming shook his head. White Yiksha spoke again. Shadora inherited the position of the leader of the Salamandra community and also inherited the position of the North District Stratum ruler. Stratum ruler? This shocked Black Rabbit, Ren Jiuyuasuka and Kasumi. Could it be that Shadora, who looked so young and weak, was a super strong being? After all, if she wasn't a powerhouse, she wouldn't be able to inherit the position of the Stratum ruler and protect the North District. The Stratum ruler in the North District isn't what you think it is. Wu-Ming interrupted their shock. The Stratum ruler in the North District is a position inherited by many people. Basically, they are some regional Stratum rulers and outer sect Stratum rulers. How did Mr. Villo know? Black Rabbit was confused. Wu-Ming was clearly acting like an otaku during this period. How could he know more than a local like her? The underground library of No Name recorded that the Stratum rulers in the North District have always been like this. This made everyone understand once again that knowledge was power. Mr. Villo is right. In order to help Shadora consolidate her position as one of the Stratum rulers, this Fire Dragon birth ceremony must continue. It can't be stopped, White Yiksha added. It's because the other Stratum rulers in the North District aren't willing to help this little girl hold the fire dragon birth ceremony together. That's why we were invited by Salamandra to hold the fire dragon birth ceremony together. Although it sounded a little cruel, it seemed to be a matter of course. An 11-year-old girl who hadn't even reached adulthood yet sat directly in the seat that the upper class had spent a lot of effort to sit in. Anyone would feel that it was unfair. Moreover, because of the harsh environment in the North District, the other Stratum rulers in the North District were people who wouldn't wake up early if there were no benefits. Therefore, they directly rejected Shadora's invitation. That was something that couldn't be helped. Of course, the so-called wouldn't wake up early if there were no benefits was only compared to the East District. It wasn't that bad. It was just a little evil compared to the East District. After all, if there were so many kind-hearted people, the Stratum rulers wouldn't have been able to develop to their current level in the North District. And they wouldn't have been able to discover that the Stratum rulers wouldn't be able to become Stratum rulers because they didn't have any backing. It was impossible for them to become Stratum rulers with their own strength. It could only be said that the strong preyed on the weak. Just like Mandela. Although he was quite ruthless to others, he still loved his Stratum rulers. Just like how he treated No Name. Because continuing to form an alliance with a nameless Stratum ruler would damage his reputation, he directly kicked No Name away. This was the law of the jungle. No Name was weak and wasn't qualified to be their ally. So, out of good intentions, White Yaksha organized the festival with the people from the North District. After all, due to the distance, cross-district cooperation festivals weren't common. Therefore, they were puzzled when they learned that White Yaksha was holding a festival with the people from the North District. Now, everyone understood why White Yaksha would suddenly cross districts to hold a festival with people from other districts. You're really a good person, White Yaksha. 16 Knights praised White Yaksha with a laugh. However, the praise of a problematic child made White Yaksha's hair stand on end. Then White Yaksha continued the topic. Since Salamandra can't cancel the festival, we can only find another way. If retreat doesn't work, then we'll fight head-on. This was what White Yaksha meant. Chapter 633. In other words, you've chosen the path of dealing with the Demon King, right? 16 Knights said casually as he leaned back in his seat. But that's a Demon King? Black Rabbit seemed to recall what happened to No Name 3 years ago, and his face darkened. Isn't that simple? If a Demon King attacks and doesn't choose to retreat, then just find a powerhouse who can definitely kill the Demon King. Wu Ming's tone was also quite casual. And coincidentally, White Yaksha, the ruler of the East District's hierarchy who organized the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony with Salamandra, is such a powerhouse. Am I right, White Yaksha? With that, Wu Ming looked at White Yaksha. That's right. White Yaksha suddenly opened his fan and made a classic White Yaksha pose of covering the lower half of his face with his fan. Because Lord White Yaksha is known to be the strongest among the lower ranks, so with Lord White Yaksha in charge, we, Salamandra, are very assured. Shadora continued White Yaksha's words. Hearing Shadora's words, White Yaksha seemed to be quite proud, with a proud smile on his face and puffed out his chest. But the lowly was still a lowly without a chest. Therefore it was precisely because Salamandra knew the strength of his ally White Yaksha, that it was impossible for a Demon King to be able to defeat White Yaksha. Therefore, after Salamandra learned of this news, he did not cancel the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. Instead, he asked his ally White Yaksha to help him deal with the unknown Demon King. And White Yaksha, whether it was out of responsibility as the ruler of the hierarchy or because of their relationship as allies, White Yaksha would help. Then you came to us for insurance, right, White Yaksha? After Wu Ming knew what had happened, he understood why White Yaksha asked No Name to join the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony when it was about to begin. At first, everyone's guess was not wrong. No Name had the slogan to defeat the Demon King and was a community that specialized in fighting the Demon King. Therefore White Yaksha chose No Name. But there was a more important reason, and that was insurance. Previously, when White Yaksha was looking for No Name, Wu Ming was showing off his power to White Yaksha. He said, when you come into contact with the Demon King, that Demon King will be defeated by us, the ruler of the strongest class. He had said something to White Yaksha. Since they dared to attack the ceremony despite knowing that you were there, they must have a way to deal with you. You must have thought of this, which is why you came to us, right? Wu Ming repeated. Of course. I am confident, but I am not conceited. The situation you speak of is naturally within my consideration. White Yaksha revealed a hint of pride. This made Rin, Black Rabbit, and Shadora, who were more gullible, look at White Yaksha with admiration. This made Wuming smile helplessly. She didn't know if it was because of her current lowly state, but Bayasha was a little childish. Actually, I didn't have much hope for no name. At this moment, Mandela suddenly spoke and attracted everyone's attention. But since no name has someone like Servillo, it's naturally not a problem to be invited by White Yaksha-sama. After personally witnessing Wuming's power, Mandela respected Wuming. As a member of the Northern District, he didn't have the slightest resistance to the weak respecting the strong, even if Wuming was someone he offended and taught a lesson to. However, Mandela's words made the 3 problem children, 16 Knights, Flying Bird, and Yao, unhappy. He said it as if they only needed Wuming and didn't need anyone else. How could the extremely conceited 3 problem children calm down? In other words, you think that no name completely relies on Villo? Juyuan Flying Bird crossed her arms and looked at Mandela. Although Villo's contribution to no name is not small, we are not weak, Haruai Hiroyuki said with a frown. You bastard, do you want to try my fist? Reverse 16 Knights said, revealing his fist. No need, no name, only needs to send Servillo. Mandela directly rejected the 3 problem children's request. In his opinion, these people were just weaklings who only knew how to cause trouble and weren't worthy of his attention. However, if they wanted to offend him, he didn't mind teaching them a lesson. As a result, Mandela's words angered the 3 problem children. Then why don't you have a taste of our power? 16 Knights laughed. After 16 Knights finished speaking, Haruai Hiroyuki, who was already prepared, stepped on the air and instantly rushed towards Mandela. Mandela, who was already prepared, pulled out the sword at his waist and prepared to meet the opponent's attack. Suddenly, a spell was chanted and Mandela felt that he couldn't move. Stop for me. Juyuan Flying Bird's eyes were like an eagle's as she stared at Mandela. Fortunately, this power only lasted for a second before it disappeared. Mandela thought that he had broken free, but in fact, it was just Juyuan Flying Bird canceling her control over Mandela. After learning about her gift, Juyuan Flying Bird's ability improved greatly in just one night, as if she had an epiphany, and 1 second was enough for her to control Mandela. This was because 1 second was enough for Haruai Hiroyuki to achieve his goal. Bang! In an instant, Mandela was directly sent flying by Haruai Hiroyuki's kick and hit the wall. Haruai Hiroyuki did a somersault in the air and stood gracefully on the table. What? This shocked Shadora and the higher-ups of Salamandra, who were Mandela's confidants. Smoke and dust filled Mandela's body as he struggled to stand up and looked at Haruai Hiroyuki with some anger. No name. Mandela roared. Then Mandela's pupils began to dilate involuntarily because 16 Knights had already rushed in front of him and raised his ordinary fist. However, this ordinary fist gave Mandela a sense of danger and even death, which was why Mandela's pupils shrank. That's enough, boy. Suddenly, Byakuya spoke and 16 Knights' fist stopped in front of Mandela. Boom. This was the sound of the impact caused by 16 Knights' fist. Although it stopped in time, the strong airflow still hit Mandela's hair and clothes, making rustling sounds. Then the wall behind Mandela collapsed. Rumble. Chapter 634. Half and half. White Yaksha waved the fan in front of him. It's embarrassing for me to participate in the event in the North District alone. It's not a bad idea to find some people. Also, as Villo said, if the other party has a way to restrain me, then Villo's role will be revealed. After White Yaksha finished speaking, everyone fell into deep thought. Especially Black Rabbit and Ren, their gazes towards Wu Ming were already filled with reverence. No matter where the strong were, they would be admired by others. Whether it was Wu Ming's intelligence that was comparable to or even surpassed 16 Knights, his extremely powerful strength, the various treasures and items that he constantly took out, and the ability to freely travel between worlds, Ren and Black Rabbit already knew that Wu Ming was a very strong person based on these 4 aspects. Not to mention, White Yaksha had vaguely placed Wu Ming on the same level as her. Also, through the verbal exchange with White Yaksha, they could see that Wu Ming's strength was not weaker than White Yaksha's. As for being stronger than White Yaksha, the two of them did not dare to think about it. As expected, little brother, you and this kimono loli are both super strong. 16 Knights laughed unrestrainedly. Why did 16 Knights, who liked to fight against the strong, endure so many times? Because his instinct told him that whether it was White Yaksha or Wu Ming, they were not people he could match now. 16 Nights was not afraid of failure, but he liked to save the best dishes for last. Therefore, 16 Nights was not in a hurry to fight Wu Ming and White Yiksha. However, White Yiksha was slightly impatient. Enough idle chatter. Are you going to the fire dragon's birth ceremony in the North District? Give me an answer. White Yiksha folded the paper fan and slapped his thigh. Yes, of course. Why wouldn't I go? 16 Nights, an activist, immediately gave an answer. Wait, Mr. 16 Nights. Black Rabbit frowned and looked at 16 Nights. They were going to face the Demon King. Was it really okay to agree so hastily? Even if there were two strong people here, White Yiksha and Villo, they would not be able to answer so quickly. At this moment, Ren, who was beside Black Rabbit, shook his head at Black Rabbit. Forget it, Black Rabbit, let's do as 16th Night says. Even young Master Ren. Black Rabbit was shocked. After all, we are a community whose slogan is to defeat the Demon King. Besides, we have Villo, 16 Nights, and the others. I believe that nothing will happen. Ren looked excited. Moreover, the Fire Dragon Birth Ceremony is a ceremony jointly held by the North and East Districts. There will definitely be many gift competitions with rich prizes. Now is the time for No Name to develop. If we can win those gift competitions, we will be able to obtain a large number of gifts. This will be of great help to the development of the community. After hearing Ren's words, Wu Ming and 16 Nights couldn't help but glance at Ren twice. As the leader of the community, Ren was already starting to look like one. Indeed. Don't forget that for Flying Bird's gift to be effective, it needs a lot of gifts as support. Moreover, if we can find a high-level gift that is suitable for Flying Bird to use, then we can solve the problem of Flying Bird's gift. Letitia also mentioned the benefits of participating in the Fire Dragon Birth Ceremony. That's right. Taking advantage of this great ceremony, I must solve the problem of my gift. Jiyuan Flying Bird had an expression that said, "If I don't go to hell, who will?" Immediately after, Ren's face showed that he couldn't bear it and spoke again. Actually, I don't want anyone to be like our community and have their name, flag, and companions taken away. Therefore, in summary, please forgive me as the leader for being willful, Black Rabbit. Hearing Ren's heartfelt words, Black Rabbit's worried heart was relieved. Really, young Master Ren has also grown. Black Rabbit couldn't help but feel happy for the growth of the community leader. That's why you rabbit. Suddenly, Wu Ming's voice came from behind Black Rabbit. Immediately after, the Black Rabbit felt its ears being grabbed by two hands. Why? How could a mere Black Rabbit win against Wu Ming? Wu Ming used a little force and Black Rabbit couldn't hold on. Woo! Black Rabbit let out a strange cry, but Wu Ming acted as if he didn't hear it and continued to ravage Black Rabbit's ears. Wu Ming's mouth didn't stay idle either as he ravaged Black Rabbit's ears while speaking. Although I'm now a spirit, my strength hasn't been weakened by much. Since I've already joined No Name, then you just need to work hard toward the goal you want to move forward because... Wu Ming paused, then let go of the hands that were grabbing Black Rabbit's ears, which made Black Rabbit's expression relax slightly. Then Wu Ming touched Black Rabbit's head while walking away. You have me behind you. An extremely plain sentence made No Name, including 16th Night and the other two, feel incomparably reliable. Then White Yiksha smiled. In that case you can go back. The Fire Dragon's birth ceremony will officially start in 3 days. However, White Yiksha's words made 16th Night slightly unhappy. Then can't we go in advance, White Yiksha? 16th Night showed a presumptuous look. Jiao Yuao and Haruai Hiroyuki were also slightly moved. I'm already looking forward to it. It shouldn't be a big deal to go in advance. This group of problematic children couldn't wait for 1 night, so how could they wait for another 3 days? This made White Yiksha feel a little helpless. They were indeed problematic children. Alright then, I'll help you wait for a while and send you over directly. Then White Yiksha put down his fan, spread out his palms and clapped twice. At that moment, Wu Ming felt a slight fluctuation in space. Okay, we've arrived at the North District, White Yiksha said. Eh? We're here already? Black Rabbit was clearly stunned, clearly unable to react. Don't lie to us, White Yiksha. Jiao Yuao narrowed her eyes at White Yiksha, clearly suspicious of him. Although I don't think you're lying to us, you still can't be trusted. Haruai Hiroyuki nodded. White Yiksha wasn't angry but smiled slightly. Let's just go out and take a look. White Yiksha picked up his folding fan and covered the lower half of his face. Then everyone stood up and walked out. As soon as they walked out of What's shop, What greeted No Name's eyes was no longer the original East District, but a city with a different style from the East District. "This is the North District, everyone," White Yiksha announced. Chapter 635. Mandela was injured. Although it wasn't serious, the fact that a mere No Name could injure Mandela from Salamandra was enough to make Mandela's subordinates, who were the so-called higher-ups, extremely surprised. No Name left in a hurry. Renhakuro Bunny had an apologetic and helpless expression as he pulled 16 knights, Jioyuki, and Kasuga Hikari away in a hurry. Wuming and Letitia were left behind to deal with the trifles caused by the three problem children. The higher-ups of Salamandra were frightened by the fleeting strength of No Name. In addition, the decision was in the hands of Shadora and Mandela, so they didn't think about how to deal with this incident. Mandela was quite embarrassed because he felt the threat of death, so he wanted to severely punish No Name and the group of problem children who didn't respect etiquette and directly attacked. However, because Mandela's skills were inferior and he lost despite being on guard, Mandela was too embarrassed to be ruthless. However, the most important thing was still the leader of the Salamandra community, Shadora. Although Shadora was young, she was still the leader of Salamandra. Shadora was quite dissatisfied with Mandela's provocative words towards No Name before. In Shadora's opinion, this incident was completely instigated by her brother. Therefore, Shadora suppressed her brother and wasn't prepared to let No Name pay any compensation. Mandela naturally didn't agree, but after being glared at by his sister, he immediately compromised. However, Wuming, who was left behind to deal with the mess caused by the three problem children and clean up their mess, was a little embarrassed. After all, when 16 knights and the others attacked Mandela, Shadora and the other members of Salamandra didn't react in time. Without Wuming, why would White Yiksha let them do as they pleased was another important reason. Therefore, Wuming used his ability to create high-grade items to help repair the wall and the damaged floor, tables and chairs. After all, the creation of high-level props was not something like projection magic. Therefore, ordinary walls, tables and chairs, the finished products created by silent sound, would not disappear. Then, because of Mandela's injury, he left early. After Shadora and the higher-ups of Salamandra had a short discussion with Wuming, because she was worried about her brother's injury, Shadora ended the meeting. After all, when the three problem children attacked Mandela, the meeting had already collapsed. If it weren't for White Yiksha and Wuming's support, as well as Shadora's understanding, this would have turned into a war between Salamandra and No Name. Shadora said, "Feel free to do whatever you want in Salamandra." Then she left with the higher-ups of Salamandra. Then when White Yiksha and Letitia were about to leave, Wuming called out. Wuming stopped him. "Wait, Vero." White Yiksha and Letitia were both White Yiksha and Letitia White Yiksha. Wuming, who sat down, looked at White Yiksha, who was sitting leisurely on her chair. "What's wrong, White Yiksha? Is there anything else?" "I just want to tell you that although Mandela looks like a villain, he is very considerate of Shadora and Salamandra, so—" White Yiksha didn't finish, but Wuming understood what she meant. White Yiksha didn't expect Wuming to let go of his prejudices, but at the very least he shouldn't delay dealing with the Demon King because of Mandela. After all, the Demon King was a disaster to the entire 54545 outer sect. Death was considered light. Although White Yiksha had previously said that the Demon King would soon be defeated by him, White Yiksha was still very worried. Even if Wuming and No Name were here, she was still worried. White Yiksha had a strong love for the people of the lower class, just like how she loved her own people. She didn't want anyone to be sacrificed. "Don't worry, I'm not that childish." Wuming laughed because of White Yiksha's words. "I will pay more attention to the people at this fire dragon's birth ceremony. I will definitely not let anything happen to them. You just wait for the Demon King to attack and deal with the Demon King, White Yiksha." Wuming smiled encouragingly, then stood up and walked toward the door. Letitia followed Wuming to the door. The moment Wuming went out, Letitia turned her head. "Master will definitely be fine, Lord White Yiksha." Letitia bowed slightly to White Yiksha, then left the room and closed the door. "Really, your confidence makes me feel a little hot-blooded," White Yiksha said as if she had a headache, but the curve of her mouth proved that she was calm at the moment. Wuming and Letitia quickly walked out of Salamandra's door. Then he realized that the rest of No Name were sitting in a small shop near Salamandra's base. Black Rabbit, who had been paying attention to Salamandra's door, smiled when she saw Wuming and Letitia come out. She waved at Wuming. The others also noticed Wuming and Letitia's figures. Without a doubt they were waiting for Wuming. Why are you waiting for me? Wu Ming smiled helplessly and walked into the small shop. After all, it's already very late. Everyone discussed that we should find a hotel together after you and Letitia come out, said Ren, who was the leader. But it's basically impossible to find one, 16 Knights said casually as if he was trying to ruin the scene. Then he was fiercely glared at by Black Rabbit. However, 16 Knights ignored her and continued to do as he pleased. But 16 Knights is right. With such a lively festival, I'm afraid the hotel is already full. Letitia, who was standing behind Wu Ming, supported 16 Knights' words. As an old senior, Letitia knew a lot about how to deal with people. It wasn't strange that such a festival would cause the hotel to be full. However, this made Ren's expression difficult. Originally, they were brought here by White Yaksha to work together with Salamandra. In theory, they should have asked White Yaksha to make arrangements for them, or just stay in Salamandra. However, because of the impulsiveness of the three problem children, they were embarrassed to continue staying there. Really, Mr. 16 Knights, Miss Flying Bird, and Miss Yao, you are too impulsive. Black Rabbit, who had already taught the three problem children a lesson, spoke again and began to teach the three problem children a lesson. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. However, the three problem children did not take Black Rabbit's lesson to heart. The three of you. Black Rabbit was angry again. In order to prevent Black Rabbit from crying again because of the three problem children, Wu Ming made a suggestion. Then let's go back to No Name to stay. Eh? Chapter 636. Eastern District 2105380 Outer Gate, No Name Base. The castle-like residence that belonged to No Name was sturdy and brand new. Next to it was a large pond filled with clean water. Around the house, there was a large area of cultivated land. One after another, stone golems like scarecrows stood guard at the edge of the cultivated land. In the backyard and inside the house, there were many golems with delicate bodies doing housework. Washing clothes, sweeping the floor, mopping the floor, these golems could do it all. The only thing that the golems couldn't do was cook, but under the careful command of Lily and the others, the golems were able to make good food. It had to be said that the golems summoned by Wu Ming's item were quite powerful. They were able to do such delicate work. On the large area of land outside the house, the children of No Name were commanding a large number of golems to do farm work. Wu Ming had already given the golem summoning item to Ren. With Wu Ming's help and improved the summoning item, Ren had successfully used his own gift to control the item and summon golems given by Wu Ming. Ren had also given the command of the golems to every member of No Name, including the children. Because of the golems' meticulous work, this greatly reduced the burden on the children of No Name. Servillo's item is really convenient. That's right. I can sleep well every day now. That's right, and the golem's cooking is also not bad. Our community has finally begun to rise again. The children were chatting here and there. However, as the leader of the group, the little fox girl Lily had a serious expression on her face. Although the golems are useful, you can't rely on them too much. That will make you lazy. Also, not everything can be done by the golems. As the support team, we have to continue to work hard. Yes, it had to be said that as the children who survived the Demon King's attack and were still able to survive in No Name, they were all quite well behaved. At least compared to the problem children of No Name, the 100 or so children of No Name could be considered as angels. Well then, let's continue to work hard, Lily said with a smile and wagging her tail. Yes, seeing that everyone was working hard, Lily decided to leave as well. She wanted to check on the progress of the magic puppets in the house in the backyard. Arriving at the door, Lily pushed open the door and walked in. However, when Lily walked in, she was stunned. Why is everyone here? Lily asked when she saw Wu Ming's group standing in the hall. Didn't everyone go to White Yaksha to understand the situation? Why did you suddenly come back? Lily then wagged her tail and fell into deep thought. I don't remember anyone coming back. Ahem. Lily, it's actually like this. Wu Ming cleared his throat and began to explain. Without wasting too much time, Wu Ming gave Lily a brief account of what had happened. In other words, you went to the North District with Lord White Yaksha, Lily said enviously. Actually, I also want to go to the North District to take a look. Wu Ming, Black Rabbit, and the others didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But thinking about it, it was normal. After all, although Lily was a small leader, she was still a child. How could a child not be interested in playing? Okay, I'll bring you along when I go tomorrow. Wu-Ming patted Lily's head and comforted her. The reason why Wu-Ming and the rest of the no-name could arrive at the no-name base so quickly was because Wu-Ming used the teleportation portal. There was only one requirement for the teleportation portal, and that was, as long as it was a place they had seen or been to, they could connect to it. Therefore, even if the North District and the East District were quite far apart, with Wu-Ming's bug-like skill, it could be said that it was not weak at all. Therefore, when the no-name people were worried about finding a hotel, Wu-Ming directly proposed to open the teleportation portal and return directly to no-name. As a result, before Lily entered the house, Wu-Ming and the others had already returned to no-name. And just now, when Wu-Ming explained to Lily, he also said that they used the teleportation portal to return, so Lily was not surprised that Wu-Ming said it was so easy. Then it's settled, Lily smiled happily. After that, everyone enjoyed dinner, took a bath and went to rest. As for Wu-Ming, he went to check the situation of the magic puppets. After all, Wu-Ming had never used this item before. Although Wu-Ming didn't think that there would be any problems with the item he made, it was still better to check it. After all, it was just to be safe. After checking that there were no problems, Wu-Ming went to the library. This made Letitia a little helpless. "Master, haven't you seen enough?" She thought that this exploration of the Fire Dragon's birth festival would make her master obediently go to sleep, but in the end, there was still no change. "Although I've read a lot of books in the no-name underground library, there are still a lot of books that I care about, so I'll take a look at them." This was what Wu-Ming told Letitia. But as a maid, Letitia had to think about her master's health, so she had to let her master sleep. Even if her master was a monster who didn't sleep for a few years, she still had to do it. This was a very reasonable request that Letitia, the maid Letitia, put forward for her master's sake. Because of Letitia's strong advice, Wu-Ming only read a little bit of books before simply going back to his room to sleep. After all, Wu-Ming had basically finished reading the most important books. The rest of the books weren't the most important, but Wu-Ming cared about the most, so there was no need to rush. At night in no-name, everyone fell asleep. Only the magic puppets that didn't sleep, their scarlet eyes flashed in the night, protecting no-name, this paradise that had finally regained its vitality. The next morning, everyone finished their breakfast and gathered in the no-name conference room. Wu-Ming, Letitia, 16 Nights Reversal, Jiyuasuka, Haruai Hiroyuki, Ren, Lily, and Sanmao Cat, a total of 8 people and 1 cat, neatly finished their preparations. "Lily, have you informed the other children of no-name?" Wu-Ming looked at Lily. "Yes, I've already informed them. We'll leave no-name today and go to the North District." Lily nodded, her little tail wagging. She was obviously excited about going to the North District. Wu-Ming nodded. "Then everyone, let's begin our trip to the North District again." After saying that, a dark purple portal swallowed everyone. In a moment, the conference room became empty. Chapter 637. North District, 54545 Outer Gate. Whether it was the people on the street or the people in the shops, they were all immersed in the joyous atmosphere brought about by the festival. They didn't notice that there was a dark purple ripple in a small alley somewhere. Suddenly, a foot stepped out of the dark purple ripple. Then the owner of the foot completely came out of the ripple. He had black hair and red eyes. His face wasn't very handsome, but it was quite pleasing to the eye. Then one person after another came out of the dark purple ripple. "Have we already reached the North District?" Among them, a young girl with fox ears and a fox tail spoke with an excited tone as she constantly looked around. "That's right, we've already reached the North District. Lily can go shopping with Black Rabbit and the others." Wu-Ming, who came out first, squatted down and touched Lily's little head. "Villo-san, don't we need to continue the discussion with Salamandra?" Black Rabbit's ears perked up. She was very confused. What the Black Rabbit said wasn't wrong. Yesterday, the discussion between no-name and Salamandra was interrupted by the 3 problematic children. Although Wu-Ming and Letitia stayed behind, they were only there to deal with the trifling matters caused by the willfulness of the 3 problematic children. Thus, regarding the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony and the Demon King's attack, Salamandra and no-name did not come to a conclusion. "We do need to, but don't worry. I've already talked to Shadora and Byakuya. Today we don't need all of no-name's people to go to Salamandra for the meeting. We only need to send a few people." Wu-Ming explained to Black Rabbit. "So that's how it is. Then we can go shopping." Jiu Feiniao smiled. She didn't have enough shopping yesterday. Otherwise, she wouldn't have continued shopping with Haruai and Letitia after leaving Wuming's punishment area. You girls can go shopping today. Today we boys will go to Salamandra to continue our discussion. We girls are going shopping? Black Rabbit seemed a little hesitant. However, whether it was Jiofei Niao, Haruai Hiroyuki, or even Lily, their eyes lit up. Then Wuming looked at the only two boys other than himself, Reverse 16 Knights and Ren Russell. As the leader of the community, I naturally have this obligation. Although Ren was a little nervous, he still took on the responsibility of being the leader. This is really troublesome. But if you want me to go shopping with a bunch of girls, please forgive me. Reverse 16 Knights showed a helpless expression. He also agreed to Wuming's suggestion. After that, Wuming suddenly looked at Letitia, who was following behind him. Letitia's there too, there's no need to follow us. Eh? Letitia was stunned. But this is Master's first order. Go shopping with Black Rabbit and the others. Wuming placed his hand on Letitia's head and smiled. Since it was the Master's order, there was no way to refuse. Yes, my master. Letitia smiled in response to Wuming. Suddenly Letitia was pulled away. Then Jiofei Niao's voice was heard. Then I'll leave the rest to you guys. Jiofei Niao was holding Black Rabbit in one hand and Letitia in the other. Together with Haruai Hiroyuki and Lily, they hurriedly ran out of the alley. Ren, Mr. Villo, Mr. 16 Knights, I'll leave it to you guys. Lily turned back and waved at Wuming and the other two. Please. Haruai Hiroyuki also turned back and said, Don't worry, leave it to me. 16 Knights replied arrogantly and confidently. Wuming also patted Ren's shoulder, who was a little nervous, and smiled confidently at the girls who were leaving. However, not every girl was as open-minded as Jiofei Niao and Hiroyuki. Wait a minute, I think it's better if I go with them? Black Rabbit said in a panic. After all, this was related to the cooperation between their community and Salamandra. Black Rabbit, who wanted to do everything by herself, naturally felt a little uncomfortable going shopping under these circumstances. Let's go, you stupid rabbit. Villo and 16th Knights will do it well. Jiofei Niao and Haruai Hiroyuki each held Black Rabbit's arm, making it impossible for Black Rabbit to break free. Wait a minute. The pitiful Black Rabbit had already forgotten that its strength was actually above the two girls. Okay, let's hurry to Salamandra's base. If we're early, maybe we can go shopping too. Hearing Wuming's words, Reverse 16 Knights grinned. You're right. Yesterday we were only focused on playing hide and seek with Black Rabbit. We didn't have time to go shopping. However, whether it was Ren or Wuming, both of them were helpless against Reverse 16 Knights. This so-called hide and seek caused quite a bit of panic on the streets. At this time, Ren suddenly remembered something. Speaking of which, the clock tower destroyed by 16th Knights and Black Rabbit hasn't been repaired yet. Ren said as he looked at Villo. After all, Villo had already taken on the task of repairing it yesterday, but after coming out of Salamandra, they all returned to the East District. In this way, Wuming, who was in the East District, was disconnected from the telekinesis that controlled the clock tower wreckage in the North District. This made Ren panic. Don't worry, before I left yesterday, I cast a magic spell on the clock tower wreckage that was fixed in the air. Even if I disconnected the telekinesis, the wreckage would still be fixed in the air. There won't be any second damage from the wreckage falling down. Although Wuming was confident in his telekinesis, he was still a little worried. After all, the East District and the North District were almost a world apart. What if they were too far apart and the telekinesis was disconnected? Therefore, before Wuming left, Wuming used his telekinesis to cast a few Lune runes on the clock tower wreckage, allowing the telekinesis to continue automatically. This way, the clock tower wreckage that was fixed in the air would not fall down because of Wuming breaking the telekinesis link. Now, Wuming, who returned to the North District, reconnected with the clock tower wreckage. It turned out that Wuming was right. The wreckage was still fixed in the air. It had to be said that Lune runes were more effective than direct combat runes in other places. However, he couldn't always let the wreckage float in the air, even if it became a landscape. After all, it seemed a bit out of place in the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. In short, let's go to the base of Salamandra first, then I will repair the clock tower. Chapter 638. After that, Wuming, 16 Knights, and Ren Russell arrived at the base of Salamandra. This time, the guards of Salamandra were no longer the two people that Wuming and Ren met last time. But even if the guards were changed, there was no one in Salamandra who did not recognize Wu Ming. It could only be said that Wu Ming's fame had spread. He had a strange and unknown method of breaking objects in half. With just a glance, he had intimidated all the members of Salamandra including Wu Ming. Even White Yiksha treated him as an equal. The leader of Salamandra, Shadora, was also very respectful to him. Even Mandela of Salamandra chose to swallow his anger, after knowing that the person who destroyed the clock tower was a member of the same community. The two guards at the entrance of Salamandra swallowed a mouthful of saliva at the sight of this magnificent feat of farming. More importantly, Salamandra had offended this lord, and Lord Mandela of Salamandra had also clashed with this lord. This made the two guards' faces turn pale. They were not people like Shadora, Mandela, or even White Yiksha. If they accidentally provoked this master in front of them, they were afraid that they would be done for. Please inform them that No Name is here to discuss with Salamandra the matters that were not discussed yesterday. Wu Ming said very politely to the two guards. One of the two from Salamandra nodded his head and turned to enter Salamandra's base. However, Wu Ming did not know if he had seen wrongly, but he saw the guard in charge of reporting almost fall down at a corner inside Salamandra's base. From the looks of it, he seemed to be frightened. This was really baffling. However, there was something even more inexplicable. Wu Ming noticed that the guard in front of him, who was still standing guard, was trembling and his face was pale. "Are you okay?" In the end, it was the kindest person, Ren, who asked with concern. "Oh, I'm fine, I'm fine." The guard was scared by Ren and stuttered as he answered. His eyes were vaguely looking at Wu Ming as if he was afraid of provoking him. This made 16 knights, who caught the guard's small movements, interested. Looks like little brother left a deep impression on Salamandra yesterday. 16 knights teased Wu Ming, but Wu Ming also saw the guard's eyes looking at him erratically. This made Wu Ming feel a little helpless. Was there a need to be so scared? Yesterday's matter was yesterday's matter. Yesterday's people were yesterday's people yesterday. It would not implicate anyone else. Let's just talk about it as it is. Furthermore, Wu Ming wasn't someone who held grudges. He wouldn't vent his anger on the other members of Salamandra just because Salamandra didn't respect Wu Ming in the beginning. After all, Wu Ming was not a demon. However, in the eyes of Salamandra, Wu Ming was a demon. Fortunately, in less than half a minute, Shadora and Mandela came out to greet him. This made the guard of Salamandra breathe a sigh of relief. "Welcome to Salamandra again, Leader Ren, Mr. Villo, Mr. 16 Knights." Shadora smiled sweetly. Wu Ming listened to Shadora's words and was quite satisfied. This was because she first addressed Ren, who was the leader of the community, and not Wu Ming, who was the most powerful. It could be seen that the other party, or Shadora, had begun to pay attention to No Name. No, in fact, Wu Ming had already seen through it. Shadora, as a child with a pure heart, looked down on Salamandra for unilaterally breaking the contract with No Name quite disdainfully. However, because of Mandela's strong resistance, coupled with the fact that he had not contacted No Name for the past 3 years, it was not easy for Shadora to handle it. However, now that No Name had a strong person like Wu Ming, Mandela's "we will not ally with the weak community" statement could no longer be used. This also made Shadora naturally begin to put No Name on the same level, which was why Shadora first addressed Ren, the leader of No Name, instead of Wu Ming. Even if Mandela was a little unhappy, there was nothing he could do. He had also been frightened by Wu Ming, and had been injured by No Name and the 3 unknown small fries. He had even felt the threat of death. It could be said that if it wasn't for White Yiksha's last shout that stopped the reversal of 16 Knights, Mandela believed that even if he didn't die, he would have lost a layer of skin. Therefore, Mandela had no way to deal with the issue of No Name's attitude and even contact. He could only let Shadora do as she saw fit. After all, this could also train Shadora's ability as the leader of the community. Moreover, she knew in her heart that it was enough to make Mandela feel at ease. Then, Ren responded to Shadora in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. "Yes, Leader Shadora. We're here to disturb you again." Shadora smiled and nodded, then extended her hand and gestured behind her. "This way, please." Then, Wu Ming and the other two followed Shadora and Mandela. Under the gazes of the members of Salamandra, they came to the meeting room where No Name and Salamandra had discussed yesterday. When they opened the door, they saw White Yiksha, who had been waiting for a long time. "Oh, you're here. Hurry up. I'm already a little impatient from waiting." Although that was what she said, White Yiksha did not show any signs of impatience. However, they would not continue to wear down White Yiksha's patience just because she did not show any signs of impatience. Everyone quickly sat down in their seats from yesterday. However, compared to yesterday's lively atmosphere, today's meeting room was quite deserted. This was because whether it was Salamandra's side or No Name's side, the number of people had decreased by a lot compared to yesterday. Only Shadora and Mandela were on Salamandra's side today. The original Salamandra's higher-ups and Mandela's confidants were not present today. As for No Name, they had only sent out their leader Run Russell as well as the rookies Silent and 16 Knights. A total of 3 people. Black Rabbit, Jio Yuasuka, Haruhibuyao and a series of girls did not come. Even Wuming's maid, Letitia, did not come because they had been chased away by Wuming to go shopping. White Yaksha was still alone and did not bring anyone else. Whether it was Salamandra or No Name, there were fewer people gathered here today. This gave people a feeling that they were not important. However, it was the exact opposite. The people gathered here today were all key figures in the various communities. Salamandra's leader, Shadora, the actual second-in-command, Mandela, No Name's leader, Ren Wuming, the strongest in No Name, and 16 Knights who gave Mandela the feeling of death yesterday and almost killed him. In other words, today's discussion was of the utmost importance. Then, let's begin the discussion about the Demon King's attack. As the host, White Yaksha was the first to speak. Chapter 639. White Yaksha's words were like a fuse that started the meeting. Ren looked at Wuming, who had no intention of speaking, and then looked at 16 Knights. Sensing Ren's gaze, 16 Knights laughed wantonly, then looked at Shadora and Mandela. There's nothing much to say. We'll help you defeat the Demon King, and the ownership of the Demon King will belong to No Name. Whether it was Shadora, Mandela, or White Yaksha, they were all a little confused by 16 Knights' straightforward words. After all, this was not the way to discuss things. However, White Yaksha could understand why 16 Knights said such words. After all, he was a problematic child. However, this was a little difficult for Shadora and Mandela to accept. Seeing Shadora and Mandela's hesitation, Wuming dropped a bombshell. Then let's be more specific. We, No Name, only want the ownership of the Demon King. We don't want anything else. Shadora and Mandela were shocked by Wuming's bombshell. Mr. Wuming? Even Ren was shocked. Not to mention other things, if they defeated the Demon King, their reputation would increase greatly, and everything under the Demon King's command would be paid. For a Demon King with the authority of the organizer, his possessions would naturally be extraordinary. At least they would not lose out. Therefore, even if it was for No Name, Ren wanted to fight for the benefits brought by the Demon King this time. Wuming naturally understood Ren's thoughts, but Wuming also had his own reasons. What does it matter? Although we, No Name, are in a state of having a lot of things to do because of the lack of manpower, what we need now is to increase our elite strength. Things like money and rare gifts can naturally be obtained with strength. What Wu Ming said wasn't wrong. If No Name defeated the Demon King in this Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, then their reputation would naturally spread. No Name did not lack funds at the moment, and in terms of gifts, with Wuming around, No Name actually did not lack any. After all, Wuming's advanced item creation wasn't just for show. Moreover, Wuming's Manchala Square array had many other things as well. Although Wuming was currently in his spiritual body, the items inside the Manchala Square were all mana aggregates. However, Wuming could still take them out and use high-grade tools to create them. Although its performance couldn't be compared to the real thing, at least it wasn't a problem. Therefore, the most crucial point of No Name was its lack of combat power. After all, even though the box court world was nominally a world where negotiations were conducted through the gift competition, this world wasn't safe, especially when there was a cheater like the Demon King. No Name was unlike Salamandra, which had members of the Draconic bloodline and Flying Dragon troops. Therefore, they could only rely on the strength of individual elites. In No Name, other than Wuming, Letitia, 16 Knights in Reverse, Jio Yuasuka, Haruai Hikari, and Black Rabbit, the others didn't have much fighting power. No, it should be that there were no older members left. And among them, only Wuming, Letitia, and 16 Knights in Reverse could be counted as fighting power. After all, Jio Yuasuka hadn't found a suitable gift, so she could only rely on some weak gifts as consumables. As for Haruai Hikari, she didn't have many magical abilities when she first came to the box court world. She only had the abilities of most animals. As for Black Rabbit, because he was a box court noble, he was restricted by the box court world so he could be excluded. There were pros and cons to the identity of a Hakata noble. 3 years ago, Black Rabbit was not kidnapped by the Demon King because he had the identity of a Hakata noble. He had left No Name to become a referee in other places so he could be considered to have escaped. It was also because of his status as a box court noble that Black Rabbit couldn't freely participate in the gift competition and contribute to the community. In short, No Name was in urgent need of elite combat power, and the Demon King who had the authority of the organizer was the continuation of the current elite combat power. I agree with what Villo said. This time I think the same as him. Retroactive 16 Nights' tone was normal this time, but it still gave others the feeling of a problematic child. How about it, little guy? Retroactive 16 Nights looked at Ren and waited for his final decision. After all, Retroactive 16 Nights and Wuming weren't the leaders of No Name. Ren was the leader of No Name, so the decisions of the community should be made by Ren. Ren thought about it nervously and finally nodded. Then how about this? We, No Name, only want the ownership of the Demon King. We don't want anything else. What does Salamandra mean? Ren looked at Shadora and Mandela. Mandela and Shadora looked at each other. After a few seconds, Shadora looked at Ren and nodded. No problem. We, Salamandra, are not a community that relies on individuals. Therefore we can give you this Demon King that is attacking us. However, in return, all other benefits will belong to us, Salamandra. As compensation we, Salamandra, will help you promote No Name for free. Then after Ren nodded, Wuming suggested. Then let's make a contract. Wuming clapped his hands, and two parchments appeared above the heads of the two leaders, Shadora and Ren. The parchments fell and were held in Shadora and Ren's hands. This was something like a contract. Generally, cooperation between communities would have such a contract. After all, verbal agreements lacked binding force. However, the witness was Wuming, which was slightly disadvantageous to Salamandra. After all, how could the referee be a member of one side? The content of the contract was simply the requirements of both sides. There was nothing strange about it. Let us take a look, White Yaksha said as he waved at the parchments in Shadora and Ren's hands. Then the parchments in Shadora's hands flew out and into White Yaksha's hands. Immediately after, White Yaksha checked the two pieces of parchment and injected his power into them. In this case, the witnesses became Wuming and White Yaksha. Villo, you don't have any objections, right? White Yaksha looked at Wuming. Of course not. Wuming shrugged. White Yaksha was invited by Salamandra, so she was nominally on Salamandra's side. This way the two sides were balanced and there were witnesses on both sides. Wuming didn't care about this. After all, it was only fair this way, wasn't it? Okay, this way the alliance between Salamandra and No Name has been formed. Then before the Demon King attacks, please enjoy this rare festival. White Yaksha closed his fan, representing the end of the meeting. Wuming and the other two also left Salamandra's base and began to enjoy it according to White Yaksha's words. Ironically, Salamandra and No Name were originally allies, but now such a drama had happened. It could only be said that the world was unpredictable. Chapter 640. At the entrance of the Salamandra base, Wu Ming, Ren He and 16 Knights who had just come out stood there. Good. This terrible meeting is finally over. Let's enjoy the festival. However, 16 Knights' words made the two guards and passers-by of Salamandra blush with shame. These embarrassed passers-by had some impression of 16 Knights' reversal. They knew who had set up the clock tower yesterday. 16 Knights' reversal could be considered to be a famous figure. Wu Ming hurriedly pulled reverse 16 Knights and walked away. Behave yourself. The clock tower over there is still floating in the air. Wu Ming smiled helplessly. However, 16 Knights was not ashamed of it. Instead, she was proud of it. Oh, it's my masterpiece. I have to admire it. Wu Ming could only smile helplessly. In any case, if 16th Knights were to cause trouble again, Black Rabbit would be the first to be troubled. Then Wu Ming noticed that Ren was a little abnormal. Ren's face was a little gloomy. It seemed that he was in a bad mood. Are you thinking about the relationship with Salamandra? Wu Ming asked with concern. Ren heard Wu Ming's words and looked up at Wu Ming. Then he lowered his head and nodded. Although I know that it's not realistic to re-establish a relationship with Salamandra, it's still a pity. It was not that Ren was the kind of person who was cold to others. After all, Ren and Salamandra had some interactions before. If possible, Ren still hoped to reconcile. However, from the attitude that Shadora and Mandela did not mention restoring their alliance, they were probably still observing. The alliance written on Wuming's parchment was only until the Demon King was defeated. From the fact that they did not mention restoring their previous long-term alliance, they were indeed observing. Although White Yaksha and Wuming were the two powerhouses, one in the light and one in the dark, since they knew that White Yaksha was here and still dared to attack, it meant that they were not weak. At the very least he had a way to deal with White Yaksha. And since there was a way to deal with White Yaksha, it was hard to guarantee that the other party didn't have a way to deal with unexpected enemies. Moreover, if the other party was an expert who could defeat White Yaksha in a head-on battle, then he naturally wouldn't be afraid of Wuming. However, the probability of this happening was quite small. If that was the case, or even worse, if they were all defeated by the Demon King, then Salamandra would naturally not have to worry about forming an alliance with no name. This was because they might not be able to survive by then, and Shadora and Mandela might even die in this Demon King's attack. Therefore, the matter of the alliance should be considered after the Demon King's attack. This was probably what Salamandra was thinking at the moment. Wuming felt that this was probably the result of Mandela and Shadora's discussion yesterday, and Mandela was the one who led it. Although they had only met twice, Wuming could tell that Shadora wasn't a scheming person, so all of this could only be Mandela's idea. As for Shadora, she probably compromised under her brother's multiple remonstrances. Because during the meeting just now, Wuming saw Shadora looking at No Name with an apologetic gaze more than once. However, Mandela really impressed Wuming. At this time he was still able to plan for a rainy day. It felt like he was already prepared. Wuming rubbed his chin and pondered. Mr. Villo? Ren looked at Wuming in deep thought and couldn't help but ask. Wuming came back to his senses and shook his head apologetically. It's okay. Don't worry so much. Since things have come to this, let's just enjoy the ceremony. Yes. After that, Wuming, 16 Knights and Ren separated. After all, he had to repair the clock tower that 16 Knights destroyed. Looking at the surrounding buildings and glass works of art, Wuming walked toward the clock tower while enjoying the artistic style of the Northern District. Because there were still a few days before the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, the outer door of 54,545 was crowded with many people who came to visit and prepare to participate in the gift competition. However, Wuming didn't use his ability. Instead, like an ordinary person, he walked along the road toward the clock tower bit by bit. Needless to say, this was a good experience for Wuming because he hadn't walked in such a large crowd for a long time. He slowly came to the location near the clock tower. Although the clock tower's wreckage floating in the air also became a scenery, it was not crowded here. After all, if such a thing happened in a world without any mystery, it would be quite interesting. However, if it happened in a world with a high degree of mystery, then everyone would only treat it as a special gift of power. Therefore it wasn't too crowded here. After Wuming cast Ignore Magic on himself, he flew into the air and came to the wreckage of the clock tower floating in the air. Wuming began to analyze the structure of this clock tower and allowed him to repair this clock tower. The clock tower in the box court world was just a clock tower made of ordinary stone bricks. After all, it was not a rare item, so Wuming didn't spend much effort. After about a few minutes, Wuming almost finished studying the structure of the clock tower. Then Wuming left the wreckage of the clock tower and flew higher. In just a few seconds, Wuming came to the highest point of the clock tower. There should have been a clock on the top of the clock tower, but now it was like a broken head. Only an uneven but quite neat break was left. It could only be said that 16 Knights' damage was really high. With a little force, the stone was directly smashed by 16 Knights like tofu. Although Wuming could also do it, 16 Knights was an ordinary person, at least he was indeed a human. Wuming became more and more interested in 16 Knights. The last fight hasn't ended yet. Why don't I fight him again when I have time? Wuming said casually. But let's finish the matter at hand first. Create green item, advanced item creation. With the recitation of the spell that he hadn't chanted for a long time, the clock tower was like a living creature. It directly grew a clock tower's roof directly from the break. Its structure and appearance were exactly the same as the original. Done crafting. Wuming clapped his hands. In an instant, the wreckage floating in the air that was controlled by Wuming's telekinesis seemed to be compressed by something and shrank visibly. When the wreckage was compressed to about 1 meter, Wuming snapped his fingers. Padash, a white flame ignited from the compressed pack. In just a few seconds the flame extinguished and there was nothing in the air. At this time, because of the burning wreckage and the growth of the clock tower, many passers-by below looked at the clock tower that grew over here. Suddenly Wu Ming noticed a gaze looking at him. It was a petite girl wearing a spotted dress. Chapter 641. The girl had an exquisite face and was as cute as a doll. Her hairstyle was short, rose-colored hair, and two horn-like headpieces adorned the sides of her head. There was also cloth with spots on the hair ornaments, and two strands of hair fell naturally from the sides of her forehead, giving off a special sense of beauty. The girl's upper body was a black, sleeveless cheapao-style dress with white edges. She also wore black sleeve protectors on her arms like headpieces. The girl's sleeve protectors had black spots on them. The girl's lower body was a short skirt with black spots, as well as black knee socks and snow boots. Although this combination felt strange, it was particularly suitable for the girl. The young girl stood motionless in place and raised her head, staring at Wu Ming with an expressionless face. Wu Ming didn't find it strange that someone could see him. The magic trick Wu Ming cast on him was just an ordinary magic trick to eliminate one's presence. It could be said that this was a magic trick that a slightly more serious magician would use. The magic trick to disperse idlers was the same as this magic trick. It was basically a necessary magic trick for magicians. After all, without this magic trick, it might be troublesome for magicians to do some secret things. However, since it was a necessary magic trick for magicians, it meant that the effect of this magic trick wouldn't be too strong. It would only be discovered by people who weren't very strong, and there wouldn't be a situation where a powerhouse like White Yiksha couldn't discover it. Therefore, Wu Ming wasn't surprised that the girl in the spotted skirt could discover him in the crowd below. Maybe she's a powerhouse from a certain community, Wu Ming said casually. The two of them had only met once, and Wu Ming wouldn't strike up a conversation with her because of this. Just as Wu Ming was about to leave, Wu Ming suddenly heard a sentence. The power of the sun, annoying. Wu Ming was taken aback, then looked at the girl in the spotted skirt again. The girl was still expressionless as she stared intently at Wu Ming. Although he didn't know why, Wu Ming was certain that the girl in the spotted skirt had said that sentence to him. And the power of the sun that the other party mentioned was most likely Wu Ming's sun incarnation. The 12 clones that had become Wu Ming's treasures were engraved in Wu Ming's soul. However, the other party could see that Wu Ming had the power of the sun from his soul. This made Wu Ming curious. Could it be that this ordinary-looking little girl was an expert like White Yiksha? However, no matter what, the current situation meant that they were fated to meet. Therefore, Wu Ming decided to interact more with him. However, just as Wu Ming was about to fly down, the girl turned her head and left. Wu Ming was quite annoyed by the way she kept him in suspense. However, since it was Wu Ming's decision, Wu Ming wouldn't give up. Wu Ming followed the girl closely in the air until the girl walked into a small alley. Is she asking me to go in? Wu Ming laughed. After all, the girl's actions were too similar to luring Wu Ming into the alley. Wu Ming landed unhurriedly. Just as he was about to walk into the alley, Wu Ming noticed a shop that was open because of the ceremony. Then Wu Ming, who suddenly had an idea, smiled and walked into the shop. A few minutes later, Wu Ming walked out and entered the alley. The alley wasn't very complicated. It was just a one-way street with a few bends. After a few turns, Wu Ming found the girl in the spotted skirt. At this moment, the girl was still expressionless, but Wu Ming saw a trace of impatience on her face. However, because of the girl's cute face, this trace of impatience set off her delicate face. However, the girl still didn't complain, nor did she say anything to Wu Ming. She just stood there silently. Because the girl led him here, Wu Ming didn't need to speak first. Therefore, Wu Ming didn't say anything. Just like the girl, he waited quietly. The two of them were in a stalemate and time passed little by little. A light breeze blew through the alley, and Wu Ming and the girl's clothes and hair fluttered lightly. As if she had lost her patience, the girl spoke first. Whether it's your strength or your character, it makes me feel disgusted. The girl opened her cherry lips, and a voice that was as flat as death entered Wu Ming's ears. This time, Wu Ming was sure that the words that Wu Ming said before he was about to leave in the air were from this girl. However, Wu Ming naturally laughed it off as if he didn't care at all. I'm really sorry. After all, you were the one who lured me here. That's why I left the initiative in your hands. If I made you unhappy, then take this as an apology. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he extended one hand to the side, and a golden ripple swallowed Wu Ming's arm. That's the rare gift of space. Thinking of this, the girl in the spotted skirt began to become vigilant. Then she saw Wu Ming take out from the strange golden ripple a cotton candy. Looking at the cotton candy, the girl in the spotted skirt was stunned. Because of the shock, The girl's face changed in an expression that she hadn't seen before, which made Wuming smile. Wuming saw that the girl in the spotted skirt looked like a loli, plus he saw a dessert shop, so he suddenly thought of something. After all, not every loli was an old monster like White Yiksha, right? Actually, it was Wuming's bad taste acting up again. After Wuming entered the dessert shop, he realized that cotton candy was the hottest product in the shop at the moment. Therefore, Wuming bought a lot of it and stored it in his dragon lair space. My space is very clean, you don't have to worry about dirtying it at all. Wuming walked to the girl in the spotted skirt who was stunned and stuffed the cotton candy into her hand. Moreover, because it was a relic, he didn't have to worry about dirtying it. The girl in the spotted skirt who wanted to refuse lost the opportunity to do so because she was stunned for a short while. The girl looked at the cotton candy in her hand, then looked at Wuming's gentle face that was like the sun, and there was a fluctuation in her eyes. The girl who had never felt such concern from a stranger had such a thought in her mind. It was as if the sun wasn't that annoying. Then the girl quickly shook her head. She still had business. How could she be influenced by the warmth of someone's concern? I don't need it. The girl stubbornly stuffed the cotton candy into Wuming's hand and returned it to Wuming. However, once Wuming had a bad taste, Wuming had turned into a problem child. In other words, he would do things like a problem child. Be good. Wuming said as he put the cotton candy in the girl's mouth. This made the girl in the spotted skirt widen her eyes in shock. Chapter 642. The girl in the spotted skirt was surprised by two things. One was Wuming's sudden attack, and the other was the sweetness of the cotton candy. The girl who had never eaten such a dessert subconsciously took 2 bites of the cotton candy and began to chew. How is it the cotton candy is not bad, right? Wuming asked with a smile as he fed the girl. It feels not bad. The girl replied subconsciously as she enjoyed Wuming's service. However, after she finished speaking, the girl seemed to have realized something and quickly jumped back, away from Wuming. Then she put on a vigilant look. Wuming didn't mind. Then Wuming stood up. It's about time to get down to business, unknown lady. Wuming was still smiling, but his tone was serious. Then Wuming looked in a certain direction. Also, are the 2 people over there your subordinates? You can let them come out now. This made the girl slightly moved, but the person hiding somewhere still didn't move. As a qualified subordinate, without the master's order, they wouldn't act on their own. Then what they needed was only the girl's consent. You 2 come out. Just as the girl finished speaking, 2 figures jumped to the side of the girl. It was a man and a woman. The man was in a gray military uniform with pointy ears like an elf. His long and sharp hair was combed back, and with his sharp face, he looked like a soldier. The woman was wearing a rather revealing white swimsuit that could only cover her 3 points. Her arms and legs were covered with sleeves, and behind her was a wide white cloak. On her head was a blue and white pointed hat that looked like a clown's hat. Not sure if it was a coincidence, but her ears were also pointy. Compared to the man in the military uniform, she looked more like an elf. Since these 2 people appeared, they vaguely stood in front of the girl in the spotted skirt, like loyal dogs protecting their master. It seems that you are a community and you are an important part of the community. Wuming looked at the girl in the spotted skirt. Then Wuming smiled. Well then, may I know your name, miss? First, my name is Villo, they answered. The male and female guards did not open their mouths. They did not dare to open their mouths. Just by standing there, Wuming gave them a lot of pressure. If their master wasn't here, they would have run away from this dangerous guy. Wuming? My name is Pester. Also, can you stop targeting my subordinates? The girl named Pester said. I'm sorry, I can't help but pay attention to the people hiding in the dark. After Wuming said that, the pressure on Pest's bodyguards disappeared. Wuming had indeed been using his mental strength to suppress them, but it was not because of Wuming's involuntary attention. Wuming used his mental strength to suppress them because he wanted to gain the upper hand by making the first move. After all, they lured Wuming here with a purpose. Wuming naturally had to fight for the initiative, right? Pester continued to order her 2 subordinates. Both of you stand down. Master. Pester's 2 subordinates were shocked, but they retreated behind Pester in the end. It was not that they were not confident, but they really could not do anything to Wuming. It could be said that even with their master Pester, the 3 of them would not be able to cause any harm to Wuming. Very good. Next question, why did you ask me to come here? Wuming nodded in satisfaction. This was the result of having strength. However, to Wu Ming's surprise, Pester actually answered this question. Just to see you, that's all, Pest answered Wu Ming in a very private manner. Moreover, this answer didn't seem to be nonsense. See me? Wu Ming was puzzled. To be honest, whether it was in the east or the north, Wu Ming was not very famous. After all, he had just arrived in this world not long ago. However, there were many people who had only heard of his name and knew of his existence. After all, what Wu Ming did in the north yesterday had basically spread. With his strange ability, he controlled the falling clock tower and fought with Salamandra's troops at the entrance. With just a glance, he took down all the people who besieged him. White Yiksha even treated him as an equal. Just these 3 incidents were enough to make Wu Ming famous. Could it be that these 3 people were a community that participated in the fire dragon's birth ceremony and wanted to see him because they heard about these incidents? Wu Ming guessed. Of course, the probability of this guess being correct in Wu Ming's opinion was almost impossible. After all, there was no lack of strong people in this world. Apart from hardcore fans, no one would lead their subordinates to lead their idols to an alley. At this moment, Pester's next words completely eliminated this guess. But you're more annoying than I thought. Pester looked at Wu Ming with disgust. However, this made Wu Ming feel that this was something new. Wu Ming had never been spoken to like this before. Then, someone must have told Pester about him. That's why they came here with a purpose. Wu Ming thought. Could it be those people who told Pester? Wu Ming suddenly thought of the group of people who tried to buy Letitia. Those people were definitely not easy to deal with. If it wasn't for Maxwell's ability that caught Wu Ming off guard, Wu Ming would definitely have kept those people alive. Perhaps, Pester was invited by those people to deal with Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming was once again slapped in the face. Because I heard that you and White Yiksha seem to be friends of the same generation, I came to take a look, Pester said calmly. Although it's not as serious as White Yiksha, you still annoy me. Wu Ming could only shrug helplessly. It seemed that Pester had some grudges with Sun, however. Since Pester wasn't looking for trouble, Wu Ming didn't need to stay any longer. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first, Wu Ming said as he used his telekinesis to send the cotton candy that Pester had eaten to Pester. It's fate that we met. Take it as a greeting gift from me. Pester struggled for a moment before taking it. After all, he couldn't go against food, right? The next moment, Wu Ming's figure was swallowed by the teleportation door. Only Pester and the other 2 were left in the alley. Pester gently took a bite of the cotton candy and fell into deep thought. At this moment, Pester's female subordinate spoke. Master, should we continue to attack during the ceremony? Chapter 643. It could only be said that this subordinate of Pest's was rather careless. She was not afraid that Wu Ming would be eavesdropping instead of leaving. However, she did not mention the specifics. Thus, even if someone were to eavesdrop on them, it would be fine. Why don't we continue? Pest asked instead of answering. But Master, it's not that we don't have confidence. It's just that if he were to participate in the fire dragon's birth ceremony, we wouldn't have the certainty of victory, the scantily clad woman whispered into Pest's ear. Lotting is right. My lord, if he makes a move, then not to mention Lotting and I, even you won't be able to fight against him. The man in military uniform frowned as he stood beside the 2 of them. Lotting do the 2 of you think that we would not be able to take revenge on him, someone who also possesses the sun? Pest asked with an indifferent tone. Once Pest said those words, her 2 subordinates by the name of Lotting and Will were greatly alarmed. They immediately looked to their surroundings, afraid that they would be overheard by others. Don't worry, he has already left, Pest, who had long since confirmed that Wu Ming had left, comforted the 2 of them. Although Pest was not as powerful as Wu Ming, she was still capable of checking whether Wu Ming had left or not. Really, Master, please don't scare us. If he were to hear us, it would be bad. Lotting patted her chest and took a deep breath. After the man in military uniform by the name of Will heard Pest's words, his tightly furrowed brows also relaxed. Then he sighed in worry. After all, he is not a pure sun. Even if the ritual succeeds, I reckon that it will only weaken a portion of his power. He is not like White Yiksha, who can completely control his movements. If Wu Ming were here, he would most definitely be astonished by those words. White Yiksha was an existence ranked in the top 10 of the boxers. Yet, these people actually said that they could control White Yiksha's movements. If Wu Ming were really here, then he was certain that the enemy that was about to attack them was most likely Pest. Unfortunately, Wu Ming really left. That's enough. At that time, the death god Black Death Spot will eliminate him, Pest said expressionlessly. However, there was a trace of viciousness on her face. Don't worry. Hearing Pest's words, Ladding and Will were stunned. Then they looked to each other. Then the two of them kneeled on one knee before Pest. Yes, my lord. However, there was still worry in their eyes. However, since Pest had said it like this, the two of them would not refute her. After all, they were not summoned for any purpose. Their only purpose was to serve their master, the young woman before them, Pest. Pest nodded expressionlessly. She turned around and began to walk out of the alley. At any rate, there are still a few more days before the fire dragon's birth ceremony. You two don't need to follow me. Just go take a stroll, Pest said without even turning her head. Amen? This caused Ladding and Will to look at Pest in disbelief. Even though the two of them had not known Pest for a long time, Pest was not someone who would waste her time on strolling the streets, much less asking the two of them to stroll the streets. After all, the fire dragon's birth ceremony is a rare ceremony. The two of you have never experienced such a ceremony before. Just go ahead and take a stroll. Pest seemed to be embarrassed. Her face turned slightly red. Then she turned her head away. But, my lord, if there is no one by your side, we will not be at ease, Will said hesitantly. Pest then interrupted him. Do you think I need someone to protect me? Pest turned around and took a silent glance at Will. My apologies, my lord. Will immediately kneeled on one knee and apologized. As they were colleagues, Ladding was quite good at taking care of others. She immediately grabbed Will's arm and walked toward the back entrance of the alley. That's enough, my lord. Please don't be angry. I will bring Will and take a stroll. You shouldn't stay idle either. Properly enjoy the last bit of joy brought by this ceremony. After all, the 54545 outer gate would most likely turn into a black hell. Hey, woman, don't pull me. Look at how I'm acting in front of my lord. I can walk on my own. Yes. Lord Will, please go ahead. Then, amidst Will's complaints and Ladding's playful laughter, the two of them left the alley. Sensing that Ladding and Will had left, a trace of hesitation and confusion appeared on Pest's face. She looked at the cotton candy in her hand and began to eat it in small bites. Then, as if she instantly reacted to something, the hesitation and confusion on Pest's face turned into determination. A cluster of terrifying black gas appeared on Pest's hand. In less than a second, the black gas disappeared. As for the cotton candy in Pest's hand, it disappeared together with the black gas. Then Pest turned around. A black whirlwind enveloped her. Her petite figure instantly disappeared. Only a single sentence was left behind in the empty alley. Revenge. Wuming, who had left the alley a long time ago, decided to take a stroll around the 54545 outer gate. When the time was almost up, he would go look for Ren and the others. Although Wuming had strolled around on his way to the clock tower, he had only strolled around the street that led to the clock tower. He did not visit the entire street. Thus, there were many places that Wuming had yet to visit. As Wuming admired the unique works of art in his surroundings and sensed the joyous atmosphere that grew closer to the fire dragon's birth ceremony, he could not help but be infected by the atmosphere. I must say, the box court world is truly a mystical place. Wuming sighed in admiration as he looked at the people of various races around him and the works of art that were filled with the style of the North District. Then Wuming walked up to the nearest glass painting and stopped to look at it. Is this the Pied Piper of Hamel? Wuming asked when he saw the image on the glass painting before him. The Pied Piper of Hamel was a fairy tale. It was about a small town called Hamel that was infested with rats. The villagers hired a rat catcher to catch the rats. The stained glass in front of him was a scene from the fairy tale The Pied Piper of Hamel. The rat catcher played his flute and lured the teachers to drown in the Wuxia River. That was the end of the fairy tale. However, according to Wuming's understanding, there was a continuation to this fairy tale. The villagers refused to pay the rat catcher because they had breached the contract. The rat catcher played his flute on a rainy night and took away 130 children born in Hamel. No one knew if they were dead or alive. Due to the adaptation of the fairy tale, the bad parts were removed. Hence, the fairy tales that ordinary people read had happy endings. However, in the box court world, it was impossible for these stories to be hidden. They should have been restored. After all, there was no need to take care of children in the box court world. After all, this was the box court world. However, is the style of the North District that strange? Introducing dark fairy tales? Wuming pondered as he left. Chapter 644. Wu-Ming gave up on thinking about it when he noticed that there were many fairy tale glass paintings around him. After all, it might be her style. After walking around for a while, Wu-Ming arrived near the exhibition hall that was carved out of the boundary wall. After admiring the exhibition hall that was built on the boundary wall, Wu-Ming walked inside. Let's go in and take a look. First of all, the exhibition hall was free to view. However, as soon as Wu-Ming walked to the entrance of the exhibition hall, many people suddenly ran out from inside. They were all visitors who were in the exhibition hall. Dodging the visitors who were running around, Wu-Ming frowned and looked into the exhibition hall. Wu-Ming felt Letitia's aura in the exhibition hall. She was using the power that she obtained as Wu-Ming's dependent. Could it be that the Demon King is here now? Wu-Ming was quite puzzled. However, the most important thing now was to go in and take a look. If it was really the Demon King, Wu-Ming was prepared to kill him directly and get rid of him once and for all. Now, the visitors in the exhibition hall had basically all run away, which saved Wu-Ming the trouble. After entering the exhibition hall, Wu-Ming didn't find anything wrong. Then Wu-Ming ran in the direction of Letitia. Because the exhibition hall was a circular passage and the distance between Letitia and Wu-Ming was not far, it only took a few seconds for Wu-Ming to reach Letitia. However, Letitia wasn't alone. There was another person sitting beside Letitia. It was Jiao Feinyao, whose clothes were slightly damaged and mixed with some bloodstains. Letitia, Feinyao, are you okay? Wu-Ming said as he came in front of Jiao Feinyao and cast a healing loon magic on her. I'm fine. These bloodstains aren't mine. Don't worry. Jiao Feinyao reached out a hand to Wu-Ming and signaled Wu-Ming to pull her up. After gently pulling Jiao Feinyao up, Wu-Ming realized that Jiao Feinyao's other hand was gently holding, or rather gently hugging, a yellow fairy the size of a palm. Without asking about the fairy's origin, Wu-Ming first asked why the two of them were there. Why are the two of you here? Where are Black Rabbit, Lily and Haruai? Even though he was asking, Wu-Ming didn't stop healing Jiao Feinyao. Although the blood on Jiao Feinyao's body wasn't hers, there were still some abrasions on her body. Moreover, the bloodstains on Jiao Feinyao's clothes were stains and her dress was damaged. Master, I chased after Jiao Feinyao. Black Rabbit and the others should still be waiting for us on the street. Letitia pointed at the other side of the road. The exhibition hall had a few entrances and exits. Wu-Ming came from one of the entrances and Letitia was pointing at the other one. Did you guys encounter rats? Wu-Ming finished healing Jiao Feinyao's wounds and began to clean up the bloodstains and repair the dress. Villo, how did you know? Jiao Feinyao hugged the fairy in her arms and looked at Wu-Ming in surprise. It's too obvious. Wu-Ming pointed at the damaged parts of Jiao Feinyao's dress. The damaged areas looked like they were bitten by some rodent. The first thing that came to mind was probably a rat. I'm just guessing, but looking at the two of you it should be correct. Wu-Ming used magic to repair the damaged parts of the dress and continued to ask. Then Jiao Feinyao, why did you come here? In an instant, Jiao Feinyao confidently extended the fairy in her arms. Of course it's for this child. Wu-Ming looked at the fairy carefully. The fairy was so scared that it quickly ran towards Jiao Feinyao. After hugging the fairy, Jiao Feinyao explained. When Jiao Yuasuke was shopping with other girls, Jiao Yuasuke accidentally saw this little elf. After hearing that the fairy was a group fairy and that it could be dangerous alone, Jiao Feinyao wanted to protect it for the time being. In the end, because the fairy was too timid, it was scared away. Jiao Feinyao hurriedly told Black Rabbit and the others and chased after it. Because little fairy ran inside, Jiao Yuanfei also followed in. In the end, the fairy was almost bitten to death by a few rats. At that moment, Jiao Feinyao appeared and saved it. However, it attracted a large number of rats. Because in the small space of the exhibition hall, Jiao Feinyao did not dare to use any harmful gifts in fear of destroying the exhibition hall. It had to be said that Jiao Feinyao did not use her potential as a problem child and destroyed the exhibition hall. However, the price was that Jiao Feinyao had to pay for it. Jiao Feinyao wanted to use her power to control the rats. However, she realized that the rats could not be controlled. It was as if they were controlled by someone else. In the end, Jiao Feinyao used the Sword of Grace and ran away with the fairy while attacking. The damage to her dress was caused by the rats. The blood on her body was caused by the rats. Then, as the number of rats increased, Letitia appeared and forced the rats to retreat. Miraculously, the rats would turn into ashes when they died. That was why there were no rat corpses. However, the blood of the rats could be left on the clothes. Letitia was worried, so she told Black Rabbit and the others and followed them. After that, Wu-Ming also rushed over. Rats. After cleaning the blood on Jiao Feinyao and repairing the damage on the clothes, Wu Ming stopped his magic and started to think. Is there any other information? After all, Wu Ming valued information the most. Because with information all the mysteries would be solved. Jiao Feinyao and Letitia started to think. Suddenly Jiao Feinyao remembered something. Speaking of which, I think I heard the sound of a flute. Flute? Wu Ming was stunned. It was not that Wu Ming had any special understanding of the flute. It was just that he had just replayed the story of how the flute controlled the rats. Hamel's Pied Piper. Jiao Feinyao also said that she heard the sound of the flute. Moreover, the rats seemed to be controlled. This made Wu Ming think in this direction. This is interesting. Wu Ming smiled as he thought of the girl in the spotted skirt he had met before. Letitia, Feinyao, you might have met the subordinates of the Demon King who are preparing to attack the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. The subordinates of the Demon King? Jiao Feinyao and Letitia were shocked. Why do you say that, Master? Letitia asked in confusion. Because I just met the Demon King. Wu Ming smiled confidently. Chapter 645. After obtaining some information about the Demon King, as the leader of the community, Rin's first thought was to discuss with Salamandra and Byakuya. Wu Ming, 16 knights, and the others also agreed, so everyone returned to Salamandra's base. In Salamandra's conference room. Because of the information about the Demon King, Sandora urgently summoned Mandela and some of Salamandra's higher-ups to the conference room. Wu Ming, Letitia, 16 knights, Joasuka, Hiroyuki, Ren, Lily, Byakuya, Sandora, Mandela, and several of Salamandra's higher-ups gathered together. Because they had become allies, they didn't sit down like before, but sat on the rectangular conference table according to the order of position and strength. Sandora, as the host, naturally sat at the head of the table. On her left was Salamandra's group, and on her right was No Name's group. Immediately afterward, Sandora, the host, took the lead to speak. Villo, San said that he knows the details of the Demon King. Is this information accurate? Sandora said, looking at Wu Ming, who was sitting on the second seat on her right. By the way, sitting on the first seat on Sandora's right was Ren, who was the leader of Salamandra's ally No Name. I'm not 100% sure, but the accuracy is very high. Wu Ming cast an imperceptible glance at Mandela. Then he told Mandela about his encounter with the girl named Pest, as well as how Long Flying Bird and Letitia were attacked by the rats controlled by the flute sound. You mean the Demon King this time is related to Hamel's Piper? Byakuya, who was sitting on the first seat on Sandora's left, said. By the way, as Salamandra's second in command, Mandela's seat was the second seat on Sandora's left. Rin could sit on the first seat on the right because he was the leader of the alliance, and Byakuya was nominally a member of Salamandra. Whether it was Byakuya's reputation or strength, there was no problem for him to sit on the first seat. Hamel's Pied Piper? Feinyao, Yao and the others were confused. They did not know this name very well. It's a story from a fairy tale. The villagers of a village called Hamel invited a rat catcher to catch rats. 16 knights explained to Shadora in a friendly manner. However, in the box court world, this story should be passed down in the form of a dark fairy tale. So you're saying that the ending wasn't good? Jiao Yuan Feinyao asked. Due to the villagers' breach of contract, the rat catcher who used the flute to control the rats controlled 130 children born in Hamel on a rainy night and led them into the forest in the north. After that, both the rat catcher and the children disappeared. Ren answered. The box court world was very particular about inheritance. Therefore, as the leader of No Name, Ren would often stay in the underground library of No Name to read and study. Especially after Wu Ming and the other three came to No Name, Ren worked even harder. As far as the sound of the flute and the controlled rats are concerned, this fits the story of Hamel's Pied Piper. Sandora nodded. Then why would it be related to the girl named Pest? Harahib Yayoi raised his hand and asked. Because in the story of Hamel's Pied Piper, the children who disappeared were also said to have died from the Black Death. Wu Ming then looked at Byakuya. Byakuya, if the enemy is really like what I think, I'm afraid you'll be in trouble this time. Byakuya also sighed. Maybe it's really possible. Wu Ming and Byakuya's words confused most of the people present. What does this have to do with Lord Byakuya? Black Rabbit looked at Byakuya and Wu Ming in confusion. Pest has the meaning of plague. As for the Black Death, it is also the plague. The reason why the Black Death was born was because the sun had entered the Little Ice Age, causing its activity to decrease. With Wu Ming's explanation, those who did not understand understood. And Byakuya is the sun's star spirit. It's inevitable that the enemy will have a way to restrain Byakuya. If the attacking Devil King was related to the Black Death, then the mystery of why the enemy would attack the Fire Dragon's birth festival despite knowing that Byakuya would be present was solved. What? Then isn't everyone in danger? Black Rabbit was shocked. Don't worry, Black Rabbit. The Villo is still here. Byakuya comforted Black Rabbit. Wasn't it because they were worried that something would happen to Byakuya that they invited No Name over? If I'm not mistaken, the pest I encountered is the enemy. To be honest, I don't think she can defeat Byakuya in a head-on battle. Although Wu Ming could not determine how many digits Pest had because she did not use her power, judging from the fact that she only had 6 digits under her command, Pest's power was probably not much higher. Even if she really had a way to raise her power to Byakuya's level, Wu Ming was not afraid. He lacked everything except for a trump card. Especially after knowing about the other party's inheritance, Wu Ming was even less afraid of her. One of Wu Ming's 12 incarnations targeted his inheritance. That was the incarnation of a warrior. This incarnation was mainly evolved from Welaslana's warrior with a golden sword. Originally, this incarnation had the ability to cut off the other party's divinity by reciting their inheritance. However, after fusing with Carmel's divine power and Wu Ming's own power, the incarnation still retained its golden sword form and became capable of cutting off the other party's inheritance. It was no longer limited to the divinity. As for the Black Death's inheritance, Wu Ming, who had read many books in No Name's underground library, expressed that he had no problem with it at all. If 1 came, he would kill 1. If 2 came, he would kill 2. However, this was only the simplest trump card in Wu Ming's hands. Wu Ming still had many other ways to deal with Pest. Even if she has a way to deal with Byakuya, Pest will not be able to fight against me. This is not arrogance. It's the truth. Wu Ming's words gave people a sense of relief. Naturally, No Name's side would not doubt Wu Ming. Instead, they completely believed in him and their companions. On the other hand, Salamandra's side began to doubt him. Although you are indeed very powerful, you should not be so arrogant before you know the identity of your enemy. Mandela opened his mouth to refute Wu Ming's words. Everyone's gazes gathered on Mandela. Chapter 646. Wu Ming understood that Mandela was not trying to pick a fight. What he said was reasonable. It's not strange for someone to have inherited the Black Death. After all, there are many communities with negative inheritances in the Northern District. After all, regardless of whether the inheritances were good or bad, the box court world still had its value. When the people of the box court world faced communities with negative inheritances, as long as they did not openly stir up trouble, no one would come out and shout stupid things like defeating evil. Take Guard, who had turned into human excrement, as an example. His community, Forsgaro, originated from a community alliance called Beast of 666. The leader of this alliance was a demon king with 3 digits. It must be said that as long as one possessed sufficient strength and did not openly stir up trouble, one would be considered a good person. Due to the fact that Guard's actions were simply too outrageous and his strength was not sufficient to attract the attention of the demon king with 3 digits, the Forsgaro was disbanded and Guard was stripped of his spirit level to become someone else's food. The Beast of 666 did not say anything about it. It could only be said that he was discovered after doing something so serious. There could only be 4 words to describe it. Even death could not wipe out his crimes. The reason why a rat attacked Miss Jiyuan can only be said to be because of this little fellow. As Mandela spoke, he pointed to the little yellow spirit standing on Jiyuan Fei's shoulder. This greatly alarmed the little spirit. It immediately shrank back into Jiyuan Fei's hair. Jiyuan Fei used her hand to comfort the little spirit. Then she glared at Mandela in dissatisfaction. Based on Lord Villo's words, it seems that a rat attacked this little spirit. Miss Jiyuan saved the life of this little spirit and ended up being attacked by the rat. However, Mandela ignored Jiyuan Fei's words and continued with his words. You mean to say that it is impossible to prove that the enemy is the pest I spoke of? Wu Ming asked indifferently. I have no intention of offending you. I am merely stating the facts. Mandela was not very respectful. However, he still replied to Wu Ming courteously. Ever since Mandela saw how powerful Wu Ming was, whether it was from the bottom of his heart or not, Mandela had started to respect Wu Ming a little. At the very least, he placed Wu Ming on the same level as White Yaksha. But Mandela's words make sense. Wu Ming admitted Mandela generously. Everyone present, including Mandela, was taken aback by this development. After all, they did not expect Wu Ming to so generously agree with Mandela's words. After all, as I said before, I can't guarantee its accuracy. Wu Ming shrugged. However, although Mandela's words make sense, I can't say that my judgment is completely wrong. Wu Ming looked at Mandela with a meaningful smile. Of course. In the face of Wu Ming's meaningful smile, Mandela nodded calmly. If that's the case, then Salamandra should prepare a response. Mandela looked at Wu Ming, who had a strange smile on his face, and nodded his head in agreement. Then the meeting ended. Because it was almost time, No Name used Wu Ming's portal to return to the Eastern District. Mr. Villo, did something happen between you and Mandela? As soon as they came out of the portal, Black Rabbit asked Wu Ming. Whether it was Shadora and the others from Salamandra, or Ren and the others from No Name, they all saw that something was not right between Wu Ming and Mandela. Especially when Wu Ming looked at Mandela with a smile, even Lily, who did not have much strength, felt that something was wrong, let alone the others. Nothing, I just told Mandela that I only knew about his plan. Wu Ming came to a sofa and sat down. Wu Ming's portal opened in a large room similar to a living room, so there was a sofa for sitting. This was an ordinary living room, but because no one would come here, it became the room where Jiuyuki, Haruai Biao, and the others had tea parties. What do you mean? Jiuyuki asked. As she said that, Jiuyuki also found a sofa and sat down. The others did the same. However, Wu Ming was not in a hurry to explain. Instead, he looked at 16 Knights, who was as smart as Wu Ming. 16 Knights shouldn't have noticed. 16 Knights, who was also sitting on a sofa, stretched out her hands and waved helplessly. Although I could guess a little from what you said in Salamandra, I didn't have enough information. After that, 16 Knights leaned back on the sofa and held the back of her head with both hands, waiting for Wu Ming's answer. Although he liked to be a decryptor, he could accept being a spectator. In short, he was casual. It's normal that you can't guess because I didn't say one thing just now. Wu Ming looked at everyone. You didn't say one thing? Everyone was puzzled. But is it really okay to not tell Salamandra and White Yaksha the information? Ren asked worriedly. Don't worry, Ren, I'm thinking about Mandela. Wu Ming's face showed the same smile as when he looked at Mandela. This caused everyone to be completely confused. What was going on? I saw a lot of glass paintings of the Pied Piper of Hamelin on the street. Glass paintings of the Pied Piper of Hamelin? Everyone present could not understand what Wu Ming was talking about. That is to say, if there is someone who can understand, 16 Knights will understand Wu Ming. Aha, so that's how it is. 16 Knights suddenly laughed. Everyone looked at 16 Knights in confusion and helplessness. Speaking of which, can't you guys make things clear? Don't keep me in suspense. Then let me analyze it from the beginning, everyone, Wu Ming said. Salamandra is at a low point and is being targeted by the other class leaders in the North District. The reason is because one of the class leaders in the North District, Shadora, is too young and inexperienced. Wu Ming looked at 16 Knights and gestured for her to continue. Then Shadora needs a chance to make a name for herself, such as defeating the Demon King or something. Defeat the Demon King? Everyone was shocked. However, what surprised everyone was not the fact that the Demon King had been defeated, but the result of the series of intelligence and analysis that they had obtained. Immediately after, Black Rabbit spoke in disbelief. Mr. Villo, Mr. 16 Knights, do you mean that Salamandra and the others summoned the Demon King? Chapter 647. Black Rabbit's voice was trembling. She couldn't imagine that someone would take the initiative to summon a Demon King. As a member of the community that had experienced the Demon King's attack, she understood the terror of a Demon King better than anyone else. If Salamandra's method succeeded, then it would be fine. But if it failed, then other than eternal damnation, Black Rabbit couldn't think of any other adjectives to describe it. Salamandra is indeed a little crazy, but they aren't stupid enough to provoke those old and powerful Demon Kings. Wu Ming thought. If I'm not wrong, the Demon King that Salamandra summoned this time, in the ranks of the Demon Kings, must be a new Demon King that isn't too strong. However, Black Rabbit held a different view. Even if it's a new Demon King, it's still a Demon King. They're playing with fire? Black Rabbit stood up excitedly. It's not unimaginable to take the risk, Jiu Feinyao said lightly. After all, this is a great opportunity to increase Shadora's reputation and trust. Uruai Hybe added. Salamandra is at its lowest point. If Salamandra takes the risk and allows Shadora and White Yaksha to work together to defeat the Demon King, then not only will Shadora be able to inherit the position of the ruler of the Northern District, but at the same time, they will also be able to obtain the Demon King to join them. This is a sure-win deal. If it were me, I would do it too. 16 Knights Reversal laughed heartlessly. Although that's the case, but if the other party has a way to deal with White Yaksha-sama, then it's very likely that both White Yaksha-sama and Salamandra will fall into the other party's hands. Black Rabbit looked at 16 Knights, Feinyao and Yao worriedly. Because if the community or individual that was forced to participate in the Demon King's gift competition failed, then the community or individual would belong to the Demon King. Just like No Name, 3 years ago, they were defeated in the Demon King's gift competition. Almost all of their members were forced to leave No Name. They were either bought, sold, or exiled. However, such a Demon King could still be considered kind. That was because compared to exiling and selling their spoils of war, many eccentric or irascible Demon Kings wouldn't do such a thing. Their original goal was not to keep these losers for fun, but to amuse themselves in the gift contest. To put it simply, these Demon Kings would directly kill all the people trapped in their own gift contest and take pleasure in it. No matter which option it was, it could be said that it was not good or it could be said that it was terrible. Don't worry, Black Rabbit. Even if something happens to White Yaksha, I'm still here. Nothing will happen. Wuming comforted Black Rabbit. Besides, this is just my guess. What if I'm wrong? Wuming joked. However, no one took Wuming's words seriously. What a joke. Wuming's previous deduction was perfect to the extreme. If it was still false, then nothing would be true. Letitia didn't care about Wuming's joke. Instead, she asked about something else. Then, Master, you didn't mention this key point. I'm afraid it's not for Mandela's sake. Although Letitia hadn't been in contact with her master for long, she already knew him very well. In short, no matter what, her master would never be so kind. Letitia knows me best. Wuming smiled, then Wuming looked at everyone. The reason why I didn't mention this key point is actually for No Name. For No Name? Renha Black Rabbit subconsciously repeated Wuming's words. Looking at the two puzzled people, 16 Knights Reversal laughed wantonly. After all, our No Name also needs publicity, young Master Little Munchkin, perverted rabbit. Renha Black Rabbit came to a realization. Black Rabbit even forgot how 16 Knights Reversal addressed him. Why didn't Wuming say this key point in front of Shadora, Mandela, and White Yaksha? Because once he said it, not to mention Shadora and Mandela, White Yaksha alone would be able to deduce the truth of the matter with so much information. If Wuming said it, then the Demon King's monster attack would likely end tonight. First of all, since Salamandra had a way to lure the Demon King, then there must be a way to get rid of it. If White Yaksha knew that Salamandra had lured the Demon King, then she would definitely strictly ask Salamandra to destroy the item that lured the Demon King here. However, even if it was destroyed, the Demon King might not choose to retreat. If you were called here for no reason and then chased away by the person who called you here for no reason, anyone would be angry, let alone the Demon King. Moreover, if the Demon King was determined to attack, no one would be able to stop him. It was precisely because Mandela knew that even if he destroyed the item that lured the Demon King here, he would not be able to make the Demon King retreat. Therefore, he diverted everyone's attention and deliberately said that Wuming's words were not necessarily true, to make everyone lower their guard. After all, with so much information, if White Yaksha still could not find the target, then she should find a tofu and smash her head against it. At that time, it would be inevitable that the other party would lose to White Yaksha. Wuming did not think that the other party's method that worked on White Yaksha could be used instantly. At the very least, they would have to prepare a little. Therefore, if Pest and the others were attacked by White Yaksha, then it would basically be the end. However, Mandela would not allow it. White Yaksha could defeat the Demon King, but she could not defeat him before the ceremony began, nor could she defeat him alone. She had to be with Shadora. This was because only then could Shadora's reputation spread and allow her to inherit the position of the ruler of the North District. Wuming shook his head as Shadora's pure and innocent face flashed across his mind. I'm guessing that Shadora doesn't know about this yet. Mandela was the one who planned all of this. No one objected to Wu Ming's words. Although they had only interacted for a few days, whether it was Ren Black Rabbit and the others who had interacted with Shadora before, or 16 Nights Flying Bird, and the others who had not interacted with Shadora before, they could all feel the kindness in Shadora's heart. It was impossible for Shadora to agree to let the Demon King attack the ceremony and consolidate her position by defeating the Demon King. Perhaps sometimes people's eyes would be deceived by others' deliberate pretense, but Shadora's kindness from the bottom of her heart could provide favorable evidence that she was unaware of Salamandra's plan this time. Seeing that everyone had calmed down, Wu Ming made a suggestion. I say, do you want to walk around the outer gate of the 54545 tonight? Chapter 648. After dinner, the group of No Name once again went through Wu Ming's portal and arrived at the North District's 54545 outer gate. Because the Fire Dragon birth ceremony was going to be held in 2 days, the night here was quite lively. The streets were filled with colorful lights, and the flow of people wasn't any worse than during the day. The gift competition that would only be held at night began in various shops, and the aroma of delicious food filled the entire outer gate of 54,545. Although the Fire Dragon birth ceremony hasn't started yet, it's already so lively. 16 Nights said thoughtfully. Although the Fire Dragon birth ceremony hadn't started yet, it was only a few days away. The nights before a large festival were usually very lively, so it wasn't wrong to be so lively a few days before the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. However, since Wu Ming and the others didn't look for a hotel, they chose to return to No Name through Wu Ming's portal, so No Name didn't see such a lively night scene at night. Seeing that everyone was eager to try, Wu Ming opened his mouth. Let's walk around and gather here in 2 hours. Don't get too excited and lose interest. The gift competition that's starting now is basically just an appetizer. The truly interesting gift competition will only appear during the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. With that, Wu Ming consciously looked at 16 Nights, Fei Niao and Yao. I know. You're acting like an old mother. Jiao Fei Niao said casually. This made Wu Ming smile helplessly and shake his head. If it weren't for you problematic children, I wouldn't be like this. However, they were problematic children, and Jiao Fei Niao instantly found her target. Look, Yao, there seems to be a nice gift competition going on over there. Jiao Fei Niao pulled Haruai Hiroyuki's hand and pointed at the gift competition that was being held in a certain direction. Let's go and see. Haruai Hiroyuki showed a faint smile and nodded. Letitia, go with Flying Bird and the others. Wu Ming looked at the little maid beside him. After all, there was no guarantee that the Pied Piper would not attack Zhou Yuanfei again. Hence, it was safer to have Letitia, a 4-digit expert, follow Zhou Yuanfei. Other than that, there was one more thing, and that was to keep an eye on these 2 problem children. Although compared to 16 Nights, Jiuyuki and Kasuga Yuta were weaker, their ability to cause trouble wasn't bad at all. In order to prevent the evening event from being ruined by a problematic child, Wu Ming felt that he had an obligation to help. Then Wu Ming put his hand on Letitia's head and touched it. But don't just focus on them. You should enjoy yourself too. It's been hard on you to be a maid all this time. Letitia blushed and looked warm. Yes, master, I understand. After that, Letitia nodded with a smile and followed behind Kubo Asaka and Haruai Biyao. Then I'll go shopping too. See you guys later. 16 Nights, who had already walked a few meters away, waved his hand. Mr. 16 Nights? Wait for me. Black Rabbit angrily chased after 16 Nights in the reverse direction. She didn't dare to let 16 Nights go shopping alone. If that happened, the probability of something happening would be 100%. I'll follow them and take a look. Rin was worried as he laughed awkwardly. Then he followed the direction of 16 Nights. As for Lily, sorry she wasn't like the others. As the leader of the logistics team, she had a lot of important things to do, so she didn't come. So only Wu Ming was left. However, Wu Ming didn't want to go shopping. That was why he asked Letitia to follow Jiuyuki and the others and not himself. Because Wu Ming was going to visit Mandela and Salamandra tonight. Of course, it was a secret visit. With that in mind, Wu Ming looked in the direction of Salamandra's base. Salamandra's base, Mandela's office. Mandela was dealing with documents. Coincidentally, Shadora was also dealing with documents in her own office. Because of Shadora's immaturity, there were some documents that Shadora couldn't solve, or some documents that needed to infringe on the interests of the community. Mandela took them and dealt with them personally. Or rather, he acted as the bad guy. But after all, there were only a few such documents, so Mandela only needed to deal with them for a short while before he finished them. Closing the last document, Mandela put it aside. Sigh. Mandela lowered his head and sighed. He put his hands on the table and held his forehead. It could only be said that this scene was rare because Mandela had always been full of dignity in front of outsiders and Shadora. We have to get Shadora involved, Mandela said with a frown. If anyone were to see Mandela's frown now, they would probably be shocked. Wu Ming was one of the people who was surprised. I think your plan has a higher chance of failure. Who is it? The sudden voice made Mandela instantly pull out the sword that never left his side even when he was sleeping and looked around vigilantly. Don't be nervous, it's me. The sudden voice came from behind Mandela. Mandela quickly and cautiously turned his head and saw a young man with black hair and red eyes. Though, sir, why are you visiting so late at night? Although he saw that it was an acquaintance, Mandela was even more uneasy. Because the person in front of him most likely knew about his plan, and he was someone he couldn't afford to offend, whether in terms of strength or influence. He had experienced the other party's strength, and the relationship between the other party and White Yaksha didn't seem like ordinary friends, which made him feel inferior. Don't be so nervous, Mandela. I'm not here to trouble you. Wu Ming put away an epic-level aura concealment item in Yggdrasil, went around Mandela's office and sat on the chair in front of the desk. Mandela didn't say anything, but he put away his sword. Because he knew that it made no difference to the other party whether he held the sword or not. Then Mandela sat down in his chair, facing Wu Ming. Seeing that Mandela sat down but didn't speak, Wu Ming began to tease him. But I didn't expect you to be so considerate of Shadora. I thought you just wanted to cultivate a puppet leader. I never thought that way. Shadora, who has the perfect bloodline, is the rightful heir of Salamandra. Mandela slammed the table and stood up as if he was insulted. Wu Ming didn't care about Mandela's anger at all, and waved his hand casually. Whatever you say, I don't care at all. I only care about one thing, and that is our no name. Wu Ming's words calmed Mandela down. He knew very well that Wu Ming was here to negotiate with him. And the bargaining chip was that Wu Ming didn't expose him during the day. Then Wu Ming went straight to the point. I won't bully you. We, no name, will take most of the credit for dealing with the Demon King. Chapter 649. Then Mandela's face instantly darkened. Impossible. Mandela's face darkened as he tried to control his irritable heart. He felt like he was being bullied. Let me put it this way. Even if you don't have this opportunity with me around, no name will definitely not lack any opportunities. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes and looked at Mandela rather arrogantly. When Wu Ming said this, Mandela knew that his plan was almost completely exposed in Wu Ming's eyes. So all Mandela could do now was accept it passively. Mandela had to admit that Wu Ming's words were indeed true. Even though no name seemed to be in a worse state than Salamandra, that was not the case at all. Although no name was at the bottom of the 7-digit hierarchy, Mandela thought that Wu Ming was probably at the 3-digit hierarchy, and this was a conservative estimate. In short, he would not be weaker than White Yaksha. With such an existence, why would no name be worried about not being able to rise? It's an opportunity that we don't need, but it's the most important opportunity for you. I guarantee that Shadora will be able to achieve what you imagine without any risk in this fire dragon's birth ceremony. In return, no name will have to take most of the credit. It's a very reasonable deal, isn't it? Although this opportunity was dispensable to no name, since there was a ready-made opportunity, why wouldn't Wu Ming seize it? All in all, Wu Ming would definitely take all the credit this time. Of course, Wu Ming would not go too far. He also gave Mandela a benefit that satisfied him, or rather, it was just right. What Mandela needed was for Shadora to live up to her name as the ruler of the Northern District, so he attracted the Demon King. Wu Ming's bargaining chip was precisely this point, and it was a risk-free bargaining chip. This undoubtedly tempted Mandela. Then Wu Ming continued. How can I believe you? Mandela asked. To put it nicely, do you still have a choice? Wu Ming smiled. Then Wu Ming continued. Mandela really did not have a choice. Either Wu Ming would expose this matter to White Yaksha and Salamandra's plan would be ruined, or he would listen to Wu Ming. In any case, he might be able to achieve his goal. If it was the former, then the plan was doomed. If it was the latter, then there was still a chance. Seeing Mandela nodding thoughtfully, Wu-Ming sneered. Let me say something unpleasant, Lord Mandela. Wu-Ming emphasized the word, Lord. Then Wu-Ming waved his hand, and 4 translucent grids surrounded Mandela. Immediately afterward, countless powerful weapons filled with ancient auras appeared in the square, each of them aimed at Mandela. I don't want you to be unable to see tomorrow's sun. The Manchala square formation appeared. Looking at these weapons aimed at him, Mandela's eyes widened, and he said in disbelief, These are all Godhood weapons? Wu-Ming sat comfortably in his seat, looked at Mandela who stood up and was speechless and said slowly, You're quite knowledgeable. Yes, these are all Godhood weapons. Wu-Ming said as he reached out and touched a sword floating beside him. Although these Godhood weapons are not the main body, their power is no different from the main body, and they can be used alone. However, Wu-Ming didn't want to prove this for Mandela, and Mandela, who had a little bit of strength, didn't need Wu-Ming to prove it for him. He clearly recognized that these weapons were indeed Godhood weapons, which was the so-called Godhood weapons. Mandela took a deep breath, then exhaled. So, you mean if I don't agree you will kill me? If you want. Wu-Ming looked at Mandela with a smile. Wu-Ming was not a pushover. He could even take on the Supreme of Nazalic without hesitation. Killing a 5-figure community second in command, Wu-Ming didn't have the slightest psychological burden. Just like that, Wu-Ming and Mandela didn't speak anymore. After a while, Mandela sighed. I hope you can keep your word. Mandela looked deeply at Wu-Ming and he chose to compromise. At least I won't unilaterally abandon my allies. Wu-Ming responded sarcastically. Wu-Ming said as he put away Manchala square formation. In the entire Salamandra, only Shadora doesn't know about this, so, based on Mandela's words, it seemed that not only the higher-ups of Salamandra knew about this, but even the lower-level members seemed to know about it. Of course I know. With Shadora's personality, how could she agree to your approach? Wu-Ming looked at Mandela with an unpleasant expression. However, even so, he couldn't deny that his behavior this time was playing with fire, and it was the kind that burned everyone together. If it weren't for Shadora, Salamandra would no longer exist. There was no need to doubt that Wu-Ming had such strength. Then Wu-Ming gave Mandela a cold look, then turned around and went to the window. You don't need to do anything, just wait quietly. Wu-Ming finished speaking, and his figure instantly disappeared from the window. Looking at the swinging window, Mandela sat down and closed his eyes. Sigh. On the street, Wu-Ming, who had blended into the crowd at some point, followed the flow of people and admired the surrounding scenery, but his thoughts were elsewhere. To be honest, after Wu-Ming knew the truth, he had the urge to kill Salamandra. Salamandra collectively held the Fire Dragon birth ceremony under the premise that the Demon King would attack the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. As for the invitation, no name, it was only after White Yaksha asked Salamandra, and received a definite answer that he was invited. This meant that no name, and the community of 54,545 Outer Sanctum had been placed in the position of Salamandra, as a bargaining chip in the wager. There were only 2 kinds of people who could do this. One was that they would definitely win, and Salamandra obviously didn't have this kind of mentality. The second was that Salamandra didn't care about the safety of the bargaining chips they used as gambling chips. After all, if they lost, Salamandra would also be confiscated by the Demon King along with the bargaining chips. However, this was not an excuse for the other party to use no name as a chess piece. Imagine if the community that came was not no name, but another community, then what would the result be if White Yaksha was defeated or trapped by the other party using a special method? They would all be wiped out. However, there were no ifs. This time, no name came. Wu-Ming admired Mandela's courage, daring to use him and his community as chess pieces. Salamandra. However, in Wu-Ming's opinion, Mandela was just tired of living. However, seeing that Wu-Ming had a good impression of Salamandra, and that she didn't know about it, Wu-Ming still let Salamandra go. However, the price was that the big credit this time was basically all taken into no-name assist. Well, it can be considered as spending money to avoid disaster. Wu-Ming stopped thinking about this matter. At this time a voice sounded. Ah, isn't this Villo? What a coincidence. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.